This is the D6 generation with your hosts, Craig Gallant.
Wrong! If you're getting any compensation, it's not charity!
Russ Wakeland. You put me on a boat with frickin' dragons attacking me and whatnot? Now we're talking. And Dan Yarrington in the third chair.
So many games, so little time. So start playing.
With contribution from Total Fangirl.
Vampires do not sparkle.
And our loyal listeners.
One game is very like another till the D6G reviews it, brother.
Welcome to another edition of Rapid Fire, the roundtable discussion of all things gaming, coming at with the speed of an overstrength squad of Federation of Saul infantry, dropping hard on the heels of a sweeping bombardment by the Saul Dreadnought fleet. Woo. Today's edition is brought to you by Game Salute and Gunship First Strike, a tactical space combat game with boards, cards, and dice. Pledge through Kickstarter.com for Gunship First Strike. I'm Geekly McNerdigan, your host. Today, as always, our panelists are Russ Princess Winsakia Wakeland and Dan Dr. Huey Yarrington.
All right.
Game store owner par excellence and Game Salute visionary. Let's begin. Issue number 1. Thousands of years in the past of the Twilight Imperium universe, a galaxy-spanning empire was in the final stages of its inevitable decay, and the keepers of this vast nation disappeared, leaving a custodian race to maintain their libraries and museums until a new overlord rose in their place. The game Rex, of course, tells the tale, thousands of years old, of the final days of this decline. Question: what race in the board game Rex is the historical equivalent of the race whose designation is a combination of letters and numbers in Twilight Imperium? Jolnar Russ. Zardak Nordon.
Lazax?
It is the Lazax! Very nicely done. Having given over their racial development to bionics and the like, they are in the time of the TI game called the L1Z1X. So I guess Leet Speak is alive and well thousands of years from now, or in the past, or who knows. Issue number 2. Between 1881 and 1883, Italian author Carlo Collodi wrote a serialized set of short stories that featured a little puppet that comes to life, boys who turn into donkeys, and many other fantastical events. When the Blue Fairy, having turned the puppet into a little boy, needs to give him a conscience, she appoints a local talking cricket to the task, given, in the Disney version of the story, a very famous song to sing. Question: in what game does a character named Collodi lead a band of puppets? Lampwick Wakeland.
I got nothing.
Stromboli Yarrington.
Malifaux Puppet Wars.
Yeah, it is Malifaux. Oh, I'm afraid I'm going to have to go. Collodi is actually Collodin. One of the other is actually a character in Malifaux. If you had just stuck with Malifaux. Oh. Of course, you were expecting a question about Jiminy Cricket, perhaps, or his famous song, When You Wish Upon a... Well, nope. Issue number 3. When we think of the term idealism, we may think of the best example of something, but that is far from the actual definition. Idealism as a philosophical term is much more specific and refers to a family of beliefs that with a very specific relationship with the real world around us. Question: the philosophy of idealism focuses on the fact that the real world around us is primarily a construction of what? PR Sarkar Russ.
Your own imagination.
David Stove Dan.
The combined imagination of worlds.
I'm almost tempted to give it to Russ, but what the heck, we've got a tradition here, so wrong! It is the ideas of the mind. You're close. You're right on the edge there, although I'm still confused about it. Am I the only one that's confused about that? Issue number 4. As is currently known to the gaming community at large, or will be in the next 4 hours or so, the new Fantasy Flight game hotness, Twilight Imperium Rex, is a reskinning of a classic Avlon Hill game published for the first time in 1979, which was also based on another game called Cosmic Encounter. The 1979 game requiring the various characterful factions of the Dune universe into the already established fluff of Twilight Imperium, which is what's going on now with Rex. While some seemed like a good fits, others seemed a bit forced. Question: what were the 6 factions included in the original 1979 Avlon Hill game? Peter DeVries Russ.
The Emperor, Harkonnen, Freeman, Atreides.
Time out.
Close.
Looking at Odan.
Paul Muad'Dib, the Bene Gesserit, the Emperor, I wrote this all on the Guild.
It's actually the Atreides, is the way it's officially stated. So it is the Bene Gesserit, the Atreides, not Paul Muad'Dib, the Emperor, the Guild, the Harkonnens, and the Fremen as their own unique little group. So I'm afraid that makes you both wrong and slow. That's it for now. Thanks for listening, and good night.
This episode of the D6 Generation is brought to you by GameSalute.com. Check out gaming news or find out what the new hotness is on Springboard. GameSalute.com. And by Lone Wolf Development. Take your game to the next level.
And the War Store, bringing the war to your door since 1999, and that is for a decade or more.
And by Audible. Try the service, get a free book, and support the show. All by visiting audibletrial.com/D6G.
And by Geek Nation Tours. Rise up and join the Geek Nation touring the world at geeknationtours.com.
Hello!
Hello!
Hello.
And welcome to episode 98 of the D6 generation.
It's like a bomb, and you're just watching the seconds
It's just
tick
getting
away.
closer. I'm Russ Wakelin.
I'm Craig Gallant.
And I'm Dan Yarrington.
Hey, Dan, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
From Yarrington.
So, Dan, and for those who don't know somehow, Dan, of course, you have your own podcast, right, Dan?
That's correct. I have several. Game Gab, Table Talk, Session Impressions.
All part of Myriad Presentations.
That's
right?
correct.
And then, of course, Dan is also our favorite game store owner of Myriad Games, where we all do all our gaming, as well as the mastermind behind GameSalute.
That's all correct.
Mastermind, indeed.
A very
and he's modest. Did you see how he just totally picked up that whole mastermind thing and put it right on his hat there?
Yeah, whatever. We have an achievement for you. Here you go. Achievement for being a mastermind. There you go. So, Craig, what are we going to be talking about in today's show?
What are we going to be talking about in today's show? Well, in today's show, we're going to talk about the game industry and what gamers would like to see from it. And by gamers, we mean the three of us, because that's pretty much who we've got to talk to. And then we're going to do a full-blown, massive D6 generation review of Rex, the Final Days of Empire. Oh, excuse me. By that, I actually meant Rex, the Final Days of Empire.
Indeed. Are you excited about that, Dan?
I am. I like that game.
All right, good.
I believe I was the one that tried to get us to do it.
We were all excited. Actually, it was on my must-buy list. I really wanted that one. So we'll talk more about why we like it later, or if we do, maybe we hate it after we played it once. Who can say? That's why you can listen to the show. Before we get to all that, though, we should talk about some of the things. We have this big thing coming up here, kind of a milestone, really.
It is a bit of a milestone. We let 1 million downloads pass without even mentioning it. But yeah, we're gonna hit this one.
Right. So we want to talk about episode 100, which is a scant 2 episodes beyond the one we're currely in. Right? Is that right?
Which is a very interesting grammatical construction.
You do have a degree in engineering, right?
Not in English or grammar.
Okay. What about math?
Yes, I can do math.
That's why the math is strictly speaking correct.
Right. Averaging over about 3.5 to 4 hours an episode. That's a lot of airtime. It's about 350 to 400 hours of podcasting. And we thought it would be fun to celebrate it and have you, our listeners, help us celebrate it and celebrate it all together. And the idea here is that we would like you to send in some contest entries here of your favorite moment in the show. You can clip it out of the show and send in the clip itself. You can just, if you want, you can just send us the email with the episode and the time offset, and I'll clip it out. If you want, you can send in a reenactment with your friends, or just talk about what you like, or whatever you want to do. But now we're happy to announce that in addition, we mentioned before we have a bunch of categories. We actually can announce the prizes we're giving away for all these categories. Mm-hmm. And one of the folks, Dan here at Myriad Games, is helping us out by donating 3 cool games. What are the 3 games we're going away, Dan?
Well, we are giving away 3 games. I will list them in ascending order by bulk. So,
wait.
First off, Ella Minis, which is a fun little card game.
My kids love that game. It's a great family game.
Pandemic, the most reviewed game on the D6 generation, according to our recent surveys.
Most mentioned game we've never reviewed, Pandemic.
That's right.
And then the massive one, which was from several episodes ago, Dread Fleet from Games Workshop.
Love me that Dread
Fleet. So thanks so much to Myriad for bringing those out and giving them away. We're really excited.
The intent there is that would go, that's 3 prizes, so that you have chances to win any of those. That's 3 separate winners there.
Right, exactly. And we have more prizes, too. So those are the big prizes from Myriad, which are given away to various prize categories. We're going to have categories like Best Moment, Most Original Submission, Most Obscure Submission, whatever the categories you want to give away for. Craig, I have one you're going to like. We got, one of our listeners a while ago sent us to give away the Space Hulk Space Marine sprues.
Oh, those are beautiful.
Those are awesome. So we're going to give those away as a prize as well.
And they don't go cheap.
And then one of our listeners also sent in some Dawn of War 2 Chaos, the new Chaos expansion for the computer game Dawn of War 2. I have Steam codes for that for free. So we're going to give those away. Then we have about 3 Black Library audiobooks to give away.
And let me tell you, Black Library audiobooks are awesome because they're full-blown, special effects-laden audio dramas.
So you've got hundreds of dollars of value here being given away, and we're hoping you'll help us out by giving us some great moments to play on the air and help us celebrate the show with us, as well as hoping we get back to you and give some of these great prizes out to our listeners. So, Craig, where do they send their entries for us here?
Well, if they want them to be counted at all, they're going to be sending them to contest at thed6generation.com because that's the only place we're going to be looking for them.
That's right.
That's contest at thed6generation.com.
Now, we'll be recording episode 100 at the, end of March, right? So we want to get these in. These need to be in by March 20th, later than March.
And this is a hard limit, folks.
That gives us enough time to cull through them, pick out some winners, get them in the show. And what's also fun about this is we're going to probably try to air as many of these as we get. So even if you don't win, you're just helping us build a really fun segment for the show, as well as celebrating the show with us. So we really hope everyone out there will take a moment or two and send us some stuff to put in the show. Really hope for it.
Not for nothing, but we've probably put in over 1,000 hours ourselves. So put in a few minutes, okay?
That's right. Episode 100 will be 100 hours of your audio clips and discussions and commentaries on each.
Well, maybe not quite that much.
Are you guys going to do an audio commentary on your audio podcasts from the past?
Ooh, that'd be awesome.
Right. We'll have a special edition. We'll have commentary during the commentary.
Oh, this is the part where Rafe was eating.
Oh, man, what was he having there? Did he have, was that popcorn?
I'm pretty sure he was eating peanuts.
So that's our big... now, also, we should mention, before we get into this, we just did... What did I say? We just did Lost Chapter number 27.
Wow.
And
those have been around for a while, too, now.
I know, and Dan was kind enough to join us. What did we talk about in 27, Dan?
We talked about The Hunger Games, the first book by Suzanne Collins.
We did, very well. And we did, we had a little book club. People seem to like those, so we did another one there. And we went through and talked about what we liked and didn't like, a little synopsis. There were some spoilers in there, so we're trying to avoid that. We thought, kind of fun. The movie's coming out if you haven't read the book.
Yeah, right. So if you haven't read it, listen to the Lost Chapter after you watch it.
This could be like your Cliff Notes for the movie, too.
A primer.
All right, a primer. Exactly. So what's the time now for, Craig?
Right about now, it's probably, I don't know, time for... Achievements in Gaming!
Indeed.
I'm trying to go for, I'm trying to lengthen it so we can get even more than 350 hours.
So Dan, who is Achievements in Gaming brought to us by this week?
Achievements in Gaming is brought to us by the shout-out from Dragon Valley from Diamond K Games. Defend your towers, crush your enemies, rule the valley. Available now locally and at diamondkgames.com.
Ooh, neato. I'm liking these games that are showing up. It's kind of fun. Let's see. So what have you been playing, Craig?
What have I been playing? I played last week. Last week, my game night was on Valentine's Day.
Ooh.
And Karen was awesome, and she didn't mind in the slightest that after a very nice romantic dinner with Reese, I went over to Myriad Games and I played my first game of 1,500 points for Warhammer Fantasy for our Escalation League. I played against Pete. And he was crushing me in the first 3 rounds, and then everything just started to go my way, which is awesome because my army's built on magic, and magic did nothing for me through the whole game. So I was like, oh, that's rough. And then last night I played this game that you may or may not have heard of, Rex, I guess is what it's called. Mm-hmm. And then I played another Warhammer Fantasy Battle game, this time with Jeremy, against his ogres, and I had exactly the opposite experience where my magic was kicking butt and taking names, and then hand-to-hand combat happened and my whole army melted. So,
oh dear.
So there you go. But
cool.
Two fun games. Getting a lot. I will finish this league if it kills me, and so that's pretty much all I was able to do. Though I've been having a busy time doing other stuff, writing and stuff.
I think we should give your wife an achievement.
You, Dan?
Well, I've been playing a lot of games. I actually am up to 3 game nights a week now, which is fun.
Wow. Achievement for that.
Although, to be fair, one of those is our game night / recording nights. That's only really partially game night. So we played Power Grid First Sparks, which is a standalone game. It's the 10th anniversary version of Funkenschlag, which is the original version of Power Grid.
Nice pronunciation there.
Thanks. So we played that 3 times, and if you want to hear more about that, you can go listen to our episode of Session Impressions entitled Session Impressions Power Grid for the First Sparks, where I rant and rave about how terribly the rules are edited. But yeah, if you're interested in Power Grid, it's a shorter version. It's set in like caveman time, so check that out. I played 3 games of that. I played Super Dungeon Explorer.
That's a fun game. Is that your cool painted set that
it is,
did
yes.
for you? Oh, that's a beautiful set.
That's coming up under modeling.
Okay, modeling you didn't do, but someone else did for you.
That's correct.
Excellent.
Yes. The best kind. So I played that twice. I played once just a 2-player game, and I played once a 4-player game. So that was kind of neat. Arcana, which is a kind of card/deck building game, was originally by AEG and Dust Games, and now it's done by Fantasy Flight. That one's a fun one. If you like deck building games, and if you don't like deck building games, you may still like it because it's kind of a different breed of deck building game.
Okay.
It's set in the city of Cadwallon for people that are familiar with that from old ways.
Yep.
Food Fight, which is a light little card game from Cryptozoic. It's basically Wacky Packages, the game. So you have food like Sergeant Hamburger and stuff, and you're trying to fight each other. I played Wiz War with Russ and Randy and Miles, was it?
Yeah, that was fun, too. I like Wiz War. That was a fun little game.
I like that one. Lots of cool bits
That's
in
the
that.
new Fantasy Flight reprint, right?
Oh, and let me tell you, Ray was showing me his version of that from like way back in like Chessex days. It was so terrible in response.
Yeah, the components are much nicer.
Yeah. So this one is very nice, although I think he did point out that you can take it too seriously because the presentation is so nice, and it's really a beer and pretzels game.
It really
where
is.
if it was like the old crappy presentation, you're like, well, this isn't a serious game. It's just a bunch of cardboard. So that one was fun. I played Kingdoms, which is a reprint from Fantasy Flight of a Reiner Knizia game. It's a tile laying game. Really awesome bits in that. They have these little castles that you control the board.
Oh, I saw pictures of that, yeah.
And they have 1s and 2s and 4s and stuff, so that one's fun. I played 2 games of Rex. I played one with Russ and Sarah. I played one with Craig. Was that last night? Yeah, last night.
Yes, yes, it was.
Craig and Dave and Luke.
How big was your last night game? 4 players?
4. We played 3 and 4.
So did you get any alliances going on?
We had
yes.
Craig and I were victorious in our alliance, and it was entirely on my skills, and not totally. I was just following along with Craig.
Achievement for that. Nicely done.
Summoner Wars, I played that with Russ, the master set. We played a quick game of that. I played The Adventurers, The Pyramid of Horus, which is the second one in the series.
Now, how is that compared to the first? I've heard the first is better.
Okay, so I just played this last night, and I do like the first one better because it has more of a narrative. Like there's a path, you're going through the dungeon, effectively. In this one, you run into the crypt. It's more like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like you go down the snake pit, and then you have to climb back out.
Right.
But, I don't know, it just didn't feel the same. It felt like they were trying to do too much stuff. There were all these separate things. It wasn't as simple as the original one, which was part of the appeal. So, I don't know. That one's okay. And then Z-Pocalypse, which is a game from Greenbrier Games, and that
hotness,
is they did a preview night at the store this past Saturday, and we had like 4 tables of it going. They had all these handmade prototypes that they made.
Yeah, I saw the TempleCon. It looked really cool.
Yeah, they have their TempleCon. They're going to be at TotalCon this weekend. They're going to be at a whole bunch of shows, Origins, Gen Con. It won't actually be out till like Q4 this year.
Okay.
But that one's fun. It's like a squad based, like basically Left 4 Dead, the board game.
Right.
So
How can you go wrong with that? Zombies. But a good zombie game. So many zombie games are bad lately.
yes. And then I'm going to pull a Yarrington here, I guess, and insert that these are games that I like to look for the future. So these are games that I want to
achievements
play.
tomorrow. You can't count those.
Future achievements. I don't get points for them.
Do we still have the negative achievement sound effect?
I fell off my. I got
No, you need a future achievement. It's like a sideways achievement. So Eclipse, Thunderstone Advance, which is the stupidest name ever, and Dragon Valley are all ones that I have played or in the past, but I want to play again, or ones that we just got and I haven't had a chance to play yet.
Okay. Well, I'll give you no achievement for those future achievements.
That's fine.
We can save this for later. You can bank them for later.
That's right.
Let's see what I play. I played Dragon Valley. Actually, our shout out just was about this. Dragon Valley is a fun little game. I like it. It's like it's tower defense meets a little bit of area control in the middle. You know how kind of like Alien Frontiers is really Kingsburg with area control in the middle? Mm-hmm. Dragon Valley is sort of the same thing. It's tower defense with a little bit of area control in the center. Really fun. I want to try it again. It's a really interesting game.
Yeah, we played a prototype of that way back, and it's nice to see the final production.
Yeah, the components are great. Also played, Randy showed me Olympos, which is a neat little game. I was really impressed by that. That was fun. It was fast. It was fun. It was sort of like a little mini, very simple Civ building game. It was cool. Also Gios, which is like this weird, I can't even describe it. It's sort of a tile laying game, but it's like you're Populous, because if you remember the old video game Populous where you're like God and you can crush the terrain and you get people to worship you, this is sort of the same thing as in Geos. You're kind of building terrain, and there's you have little civilizations that are connected by terrain. You're trying to get worshippers from each piece of terrain. It's a pretty interesting little game. It's kind of an older game, but it was fun. Got my family back into Alhambra lately. We played this when we were camping in the fall with the Clarks, and we broke it out just locally at the house, and my whole family loves it. It was a great 4-player game. Really, really recommend Alhambra, especially if you have kids, older kids. And we also broke out, we got a demo copy of this from, I think it was Gen Con, we've had it lying around, Gridstones, which is a very simple little stone-laying game in which you try to match patterns on cards. So basically, if you imagine like a giant tic-tac-toe board with many, many more than just the 9 squares, you have a deck of cards, and there's certain patterns of stones you want to make, and all you're basically doing, each player as you go on the table, you either put a stone on the board or take a stone off, hoping to make the pattern match, but then other people are foiling you doing different things, and it's sort of a very simple but fun little sort of screw your neighbor game. As Dan mentioned, we played Wiz War. And I got I had a really, really fun game of War Machine, Craig. We were in the Gnarls League. We had a team game, myself and Dana versus Miles and Chuck. And it was tough because they were playing in the Gnarls League. They have sort of funky alliances. It was the Trolls are working with Kador. So we were playing against the Butcher and Borka. That was a tough battle.
I can imagine.
We did okay, and we were. It was kind of close, and we lost in the end. But it turned out we lost in the end because Miles misread his card, and one of his models was doing a bit more than it should have by about 6 inches of range. So we kind of we kind of just should have checked this card. We didn't, but it was a lot of fun. That was a blast game. I can't wait to play more in the War Machine League. That was fun. And Dan, you mentioned this. I got to play Thunderstone Advanced.
It's not advanced. That's the stupid part about
Thunderstone Advance?
Yeah. It's supposed to be like Thunderstone Advance.
Oh, I see.
It's really bad.
Well, here's what's cool about it.
As a name.
I've had mixed. I never really, to be honest, gotten into Thunderstone, and but I'm getting more and more into deck building games. I really like some of the newer ones. I was like, well, maybe Thunderstone could be fun. I'll try it again. And the new one, to be honest, caught my fancy because Nicole actually got sent a demo copy from AEG, and we were looking at it. It's like, look at this cool board. The board is really giant, and it's pretty, and the artwork on the cards is much, much better. It's like, well, let's try it again. What's cool about it is it supports the Epic version around the board now, which I guess is the best way to play it. But if you still play by the basic rules of the game, the biggest problem I have with Thunderstone is if the monsters get shuffled badly, you can get high-end monsters up front, and then nobody can do anything. And that's really, really dull. So what you really have to do, and this is an optional rule, I think you have to play with the rule that you sort the monsters from lowest to highest so that you can actually get some progress going. And then the game's a lot of fun. When the monsters are dying and things are moving, it's actually quite a fun little game. But if the monsters get clogged up or you have a bad table of stuff, it gets very dull very quickly. So it's one of those games where I don't know why they just didn't really make it advanced instead of advanced and force the monsters to be organized that way.
Yeah, I don't know. They could have done so many cool things with that title. I mean, the game itself made it fine. There's lots of improvements in the game. There's that name is so... I literally emailed them that moment I saw it. I was like, is that a joke? Is that a misspelling? I just thought they left off the D, right? Like, right. Why didn't you call it Thunderstone Epic or Thunderstone, like, Wilderness? They have a new Wilderness board. And it's
that's
like...
Again, the reverse side of the board. The board's two-sided. It's Wilderness and Dungeon.
And the light's different in that. Did you notice?
Yes, the light is less severe in the Wilderness, so you can kind of be less obsessed with getting the right torches. And
so basically, when I'm introducing new players, that's a much better way to introduce them because it's a 1-for-1 ratio as opposed to 1-for-2.
Yep. So another fun with my kids, my girls are really getting the age now, 9 years old, 8 and 9 apparently, into really fun board games. Battleship Galaxy. So Rose said to me one day, she's like, my oldest daughter, she said, Dad, I want to try another one of your games that you won't let me play. I said, okay, let's go downstairs. So we went down there, and she's like, this one looks cool. It's got spaceships, and it's Battleship Galaxy. I said, it's perfect. Let's bring it upstairs. So we played it. We did half the board. We did the first scenario from the book, and it actually says in there, try it with no tactics cards for simpler gameplay. I'm like, I'll do no cards. So basically, full rules of the game, everything there except those little cards where you get to shoot nukes and stuff, not in there. And she had a blast. In fact, we're playing it. She's getting very serious about it, figuring out her angle, figuring out how she can swamp me and stuff. And I said, what'd you think? I love this, she said. So she had a really, really good time with it. So Battleship Galaxy is a great game with the kids as well as with the tactics cards. It's a fun little game for gamers, too.
Cool.
Last but not least, played Summoner's Wars with Dan, which we talked about before, and, of course, Rex, which we'll talk about later in the show. And that is my gaming achievements.
You two have been playing an awful lot of games.
I've been busy. You know where I play all my games? Guess where I play all my games?
Oh, I would wager at Myriad Games and possibly at your kitchen table with your daughter.
I'm at kitchen table, but I'm not at my kitchen table. I'm looking for friends. I am playing at Myriad Games, who, as Dan well knows, having this great deal right now. Not only can you upgrade to the new Myriad Games memberships, but the big thing is head on over and, you changed it on me.
I was going to say, I thought you were going to be talking about on behalf of friendly professional gaming stores everywhere, at which point I was going to jump in and go, you know what you should do, Russ, is go check out the new upgraded MVP memberships at myriadgames.com/MVP.
Right.
You recharge each month for Myriad money, MVP points, and MVP rewards.
Nice. That's the other problem with having the sponsor here in the house. You can change the ads on me while I'm even looking.
Yeah, that was actually kind of snarky.
I don't know. I thought you left it in there from 97. So.
Right. Yeah, which show's not been around that long. All right, so modeling. What have you been doing?
I think you meant episode 97.
Oh, that could be it. What have you been doing, Dan?
We're good at math.
Not.
I have been. I have this lovely set of Super Dungeon Explorer. It's all deluxely painted up, and I got it all done, and I got it this past month. I didn't do any of the work for it. It was all Andy. So, but it is gorgeous. And as somebody who does not do any modeling or painting or assembling, because I don't have any inclination to do that, but I love the outlay of it. Like, I cannot imagine actually buying Super Dungeon Explorer. We have two sets. Jeff has his set that he took and he put together with, like, some wrong kind of glue. It basically, we call it, like, the spider web set because it has all these strands of glue coming off it. He's like, it was easy. I put it together in 15 minutes, all the models. And I was just like, okay, well, I have my nicely painted set that Andy spent like 3 months on. He's got it all nicely painted. We played it. It was gorgeous. And then I'm getting, the battle foam tray to store it in. So I get that. And Jess was like, yeah, I don't really need that. They're all just kind of in a ball in my box. We just pull off the models that we need. So I've got that. That was modeling that was done on my behalf, I guess, but I did not do that. And then I also I did some very in-depth modeling with the ships in Rex. I put the stands off and I put them together.
Nice. Well, actually, I painted my Rex ships.
That was not fully painted.
So what happened was we got Rex over the weekend and I wanted to play, and so Dan can we get together Sunday and play? And he kept texting me, "Have you painted the ships yet? Have you painted the ships yet?" So all I did was I sprayed them black with some P3 primer, dry brushed them with Space Wolf gray, and took a moment to get sunburst yellow and just paint the engine lights, the engine holes in there.
I was very disappointed. You had them for almost 12 hours and you didn't have them fully painted.
I thought that was pretty good for 12 hours. Anyway, they look nice, just dry brushed. I put them on Board Game Geek. I got a lot of responses, a lot of tips on the old Geek Gold jar there. Craig, what have you been doing for modeling? I'm sure it's like 50 things.
It's not 50 things, no, but it was. I got all overachieving last time when I was trying to get ready for my 1,500 point army, and what I was doing was actually doing the units that at their unit size that I would need for 2,000 points. So I was doing all kinds of models, and then I looked at my army and was like, holy crap, I need other guys. So I needed to do 5 other Chaos Warriors and 4 heroes just in case there's a spell that I have that can summon a hero. So for every hero, I needed another hero. So I needed to paint 4 more heroes. And I am in the process of making a customized Chaos War Shrine that I think is going to look pretty darn cool.
What do you do with a War Shrine?
What's that?
What do you do with a War Shrine?
The War Shrine is kind of like a chariot, but it moves like a monster, but it looks kind of like a chariot, and it goes into the battle behind your army and sort of endows a different unit each turn with special abilities as the Chaos Gods look with favor upon them.
Well, cool.
So,
all right, that's the modeling.
Not a lot, but some cool stuff.
That's pretty good. It's better than 4 ships I've dry brushed.
Yeah, well,
Dan, how about other Dan? What have you been doing at other?
I've been doing a lot of stuff. So I finished reading The Hunger Games shortly before we recorded that. So I really enjoyed that. And then I got back to reading Dance with Dragons, which I had misplaced during my move recently. So I found the book, and I'm like, oh, I'm 500 pages into this. I think I should keep reading. So I'm getting back into that. Totally agree with Craig's assessment that he is a great tactical writer and a terrible strategic writer. Yeah. I've been playing Dungeon Scroll. It's this app on iPhone, and it's basically just like a real-time word game. So you go into a dungeon, and it's like, it doesn't matter what the monster is, like there's a snake, and you basically put words together. It has to be at least 3 letters. Yeah. And as soon as you complete them, you basically throw them at the monster and they do damage. The more words there are, the better. Yeah. You can't repeat words. And you just keep going until you die, because the monsters just constantly attack you. Right. So the faster you kill them, the better. So that one's been pretty addictive. So that's on on the iOS there. I watched Chronicle, the movie. Did you guys see this?
I've heard of it. I didn't. I almost went to see it.
It looked
didn't.
good.
Yeah, it was really good. I wasn't. Sarah wanted to go see it, and there weren't any other movies that I wanted to see that day, so I was just kind of like, oh, okay, I'll watch it. But it was really good, so I'd recommend it. It's kind of a dark superhero gone wrong tale / teenage. It's a weird thing, but it's worth seeing. It's done in a kind of documentary style, but it's really good. Great production values. Watching Castle. I watch a lot of different TV shows on Hulu and Netflix and stuff, and Castle is definitely one of my favorites. So I've been keeping up on that.
Yep.
Unfortunately, my schedule got interrupted, so I'm in the middle of a. I didn't get to watch the latest one, so I'm in the middle of a 2-parter. So.
Oh, that's always awful. Yeah.
Yeah. What will happen next? I played Fortune Street for the Wii, which is basically like a Monopoly ripoff.
Okay.
But it's like Monopoly, but worse because every property has stock values, and you can invest in different territories. And I'm like, it was made at the same time as Mario Party, and I was just like, who made this? This is terrible. We got it. We're like, oh, that'd be kind of cool, but it ended up being awful. So, Fortune Street, save yourself the time.
Right.
I've been watching Once Upon a Time and Grimm, and there's a lot of kind of thoughts about like Once Upon a Time's a series on ABC. I think Grimm is on NBC, and then
right.
And I also read Fables, which is a trade paperback / comic series, basically.
Right. Yep.
And every time I watch them, I just keep going because Fables was optioned by one of the networks, and then they were like, "Oh no, we're going to do Fables," and I was like, "Oh no, you have to do Fables." And then they were like, "We're going to do Once Upon a Time." And it's this terrible, like schlocky. Oh, it's just awful. Grimm is slightly better.
See, I'm reversed of you. I like Once Upon a Time better than Grimm.
Really? Oh, I cannot stand the Queen.
I totally do.
Here, I think Grimm feels like a Buffy reboot.
Yep. What?
Grimm's Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Whereas Once Upon a Time is a little
Buffy
more
the Vampire Slayer?
Nothing except it's been done. Whereas Once Upon a Time is a little more original, I think.
Yeah.
Original?
And they have little nods to cool things that I haven't seen in Grimm. Like this last the Valentine's Day episode. Did anybody catch the name of the florist?
No, what was it? I missed it.
Name of the florist was Game of Thorns.
Oh, nice. I haven't watched that one yet. I'm behind one or two. See?
No, I totally prefer the procedural setup of Grimm. I like that much better.
Yeah, all right, okay.
I like the originality of.
Once Upon a Time is totally not original.
And
anyway,
you know, the author of Fables actually came out and said it's not a ripoff of my book.
Yeah, well, the whole point is
I don't know who sent him a big check, but I'm just saying.
the whole point of both of those is that every time I watch either of them, I go, I wish this were Fables.
Yeah, well, Fables would be awesome as a show.
That's just I've been watching those, and I've been watching a new show called The Finder, which is if you've watched Bones, there was an episode called The Finder, and it was basically this guy who has this sort of preternatural ability to figure out connections between things and solve crimes, and that just launched as a separate show, and so I watched the first episode of that, and I like it.
Okay, cool. That's good stuff. I'll give you achievement for all that except for the whole Grimm favoritism thing.
Shut up, man. Fables favoritism.
Here's my thing about Grimm. Why they all the monsters like fear him like he's the Slayer, but he has no abilities.
He has untapped abilities that we don't know about yet.
He's got nothing.
Yeah, he's not dead yet.
He's a cop.
That's something.
Well, I know, but he's got a good book. But I mean, it's like, you're the Grimm. It's like, well,
do you see the one where
kill
like,
him now?
The three guys are like, no, there's a Grimm, and like they drive up to his house, and they're like,
I saw that one.
They're like, is that the Grimm? And then they like, get down, and they drive away.
No, they're all scared of him. It's like, dude, just shoot him, cap him.
Really, just
in
Once Upon a Time, I cannot stand the over-the-top schlockiness of it, and I hate the Queen. The actress that plays the Queen, I cannot buy at all. Every time I see her, I'm like, you are a terrible actress.
Don't poke the Dan.
Apparently so. Okay, well, just, I'm glad you're passionate about that. Sorry. Let's see. Craig.
Fables rules.
How about you, Craig?
Okay, well, I haven't actually talked about this, which is bizarre because I can talk about it now, and I could talk about it like 2 months ago. But my very first Fantasy Flight assignment is now in preview up at the website. And it is the Coronis Bestiary, which is a book all about monsters and NPCs for Rogue Trader.
Well, that's cool.
And my assignment was basically fleshing out the entire Eldar race, which is ironic because I hate the Eldar. So that was awesome, and seeing that on the website has been very cool and kind of given me the energy because I'm in the middle of a huge thing right now, which is way more words and much more complex and much more of a combined effort amongst several other people that are much more senior than I am, and I'm kind of like, ooh, this is kind of like my first big thing, and so most of my time, and I cannot call it free time anymore, has been spent doing that, but I still managed to read and listen to books. Ooh. And so I'm going to go with read first,
Right.
because I found I'm still really annoyed with the way I have to find books now. When I finish a book, I'm like, oh crap. Although it is cool because the Kindle then recommends books for you at the end of every book, so that's pretty neat. But and I'm trying to find books that people are like recommending to me, but I've had 2 Kindle fails in the past 3 weeks where I've been like, oh, I'll get that book, and Kindle doesn't have it, which is odd because I pretty much thought they had everything. But that was annoying. Like, they don't have The Black Company, which is a book that has been recommended to me by several different listeners. But so anyway, what I did find was this book called The Iron the first book's called Hounded. It's The Iron Druid Chronicles by Kevin Hearn, and these are new books. And basically the story is a pretty cool story. He's the last druid alive on the whole earth, and he's got this herb lore that allows him to live as long as nobody kills him. But he made a deal with the Celtic death goddess that she needed something done, and it needed to be done by a mortal, and he's really cagey. So he made a deal with the death goddess that she would never come for him. Now, the whole concept of the book is that all these different things exist in all these different planes. So just because the goddess that's supposed to come for you when you die because you're a Celt doesn't come for you, doesn't necessarily mean like the Christian view of death might not come, or some other like Roman god of death could come and get you. So he's kind of like hedging his bets, but it's really cool. I like it a lot because, it's got that whole Irish bent to it. And so it's funny because he's 2,000 years old now because he made that deal back, in the Dark Ages. And he keeps running into witches and stuff. And witches, he is like basically 21 because he's been doing this herb lore stuff since he was 21. And you run into witches who look like they're in their mid-20s, but you get an idea that they're not. And then when they die, they turn into like these old, nasty, scraggly, 150-year-old nasty women. And it's always kind of funny because they're like, oh, you're more powerful than you can imagine. And he's like, I was alive before Christ was born. And they're like, oh, crap. So it's all kinds of weird, neat little mythological stuff. And I'm like, I don't know, the urban fantasy thing must have hit me all of a sudden because on Audible, this is – and why don't we mention how cool Audible is because it just got cooler.
It did start.
Right here.
Yeah, it did. It did. So, regular listeners will know that the Audible has a great deal for D6G listeners. If you go to audibletrial.com/D6G, order our website and just click on the Audible link on the right-hand side there, you can get a free trial for Audible. But starting March 1st, which is, pretty much the day after this goes live, starting March 1st, if you do that trial deal, instead of getting just 15 days free and a free book credit, now you'll get 30 days free and a free credit. So the big deal here, of course, the credit's a big deal because that gives you pretty much almost any of their Audible books for free, and you get to keep that forever. But, Craig, what makes the 30-day deal better than just 15 days?
Well, the key is getting the book is awesome. But I have now I've gotten more Audible books off of my, not counting the credits that I get from my membership because the sales they have are so incredible. You get one audiobook per month as a member, which is great. But then on top of that, you're going to save 30% on all your additional purchases, which is really great. Up to 75% off of CD audiobooks from their retail prices. I haven't taken advantage of this yet, but you do get a free daily audio subscription to the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. I want to know who's reading those like at 6 o'clock in the morning every day. Like whose job is that? Because that's got to suck. And then you've got the member-only special deals and sales, which is what I want to kind of talk about for right now. Because they had, and I asked Russ to tweet this when I realized what was going on.
Tweeted it.
They had an awesome sale where they just added a new feature to Audible, which is if a book is in a series, the book entry will now tell you it's in a series and what the series is, and it's much easier to find all the other books in the series. So to promote this new thing that they've got, almost every series of almost every genre, the first book was on sale at the audiobook, which usually costs you about $25 or 1 credit or $19 if you're getting it as a member, for $5.
I know, right?
It was insane. I spent $20. I got 4 books for the 4 audiobooks, the first of a bunch of different series that looked interesting to me. And that's an incredible deal. Those sales and those special things, those special offers are really what makes that 30 days worth so much more because they're always having these deals.
Right.
But yeah, so what did I do? I went and I got this thing, and it's called Monster Hunters International, which the name really doesn't do it a lot of, And so I was listening to it, and it's really kind of crazy, and it reads totally like Nerdvana. And just to give you an idea, here's the main character, right? It's a first-person narrative. He's an accountant. Okay. He's a cubicle monkey. Okay, I got it. And then over the course of the next 20 minutes or so, but did I mention that I got myself through college by cage fighting? Did I mention that my father is this like Green Beret who taught me how to shoot, and I'm nationally, registered as a lethal marksman? I mean, it's just like this crazy, like this geek was in his cubicle and daydreaming, and boom, now you got a book. And that's totally what it is. Like all these, it's kind of like imagine if it was like the Dresden Files. And you had this like corporation that goes around killing the monsters instead of cool wizards that do it on the fly by a shoestring budget. So it's kind of like a private security agency, but they go around hunting monsters instead. And it's funny. For probably the first 2 or 3 hours of listening, I was just annoyed. Because every time, I mean, it's all cheesy and, he's in love with a beautiful woman whose family owns the corporation, but she's dating this jerk that she thinks has good qualities. But and every author who ever does this makes the same mistake. It's like, this woman is supposed to be the prettiest and the smartest and the best shooter, and she does this and she does that, but she's blind to the blatant flaws of the guy she's dating.
Sounds like Once Upon a Time.
Shut up.
I'm just going to smack him now.
Okay, wow, yeah, well, smack him now. You've got him right there. But now that I'm kind of like embracing the cheese, and as a good friend of mine once said, any good hero sandwich needs some serious cheese.
That's right.
So that's what I've been listening to, and so yeah, so it's fun once you just get, it's just going to be like, I'm the super mega amazing hero, and you can tell he's trying not to make him super amazing because he has a scar across his face, but then you never mention stuff like that.
So I have a question about the Audible thing. Like, do they have bundle deals too? Like, hey, the first book, but if I want to buy the whole like series at once, do they have deals like that or?
I haven't seen anything like that. I'm remembering seeing something like that, but I think it was Kindle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they move them in and out.
I know Kindle has like. If a book is available as an omnibus, then you can get it as the Kindle also. I don't remember seeing anything about Audible.
They do credit deals sometimes, so you'll see like, buy 3 credits at the price of 2 sometimes because you can add more credits. Yeah. So that would sort of be the same thing because if every book in the series was 1 credit, you could just, get a bundle.
Yeah, like if I like the Hunger Games, I got the first one. Hey, I'll get the other 2 right away.
Right, something like that. Let's see, what have I been doing? Let's see, real quick. Hero Academy, just this very day. I'm loving this little iOS app. I play in 20 games at a time on it. Dwarves just came out today. Everybody's excited about the Dwarves. And they introduced leaderboards now, so you can go into a little game center on your iPhone and see how all your friends are doing and how many matches you play, which have made it even more obsessive for all of us geeks out there to try to figure out how many more games we got to win to beat our friend, which is always we gamers like to do that. Let's see, my oldest daughter is quickly becoming my RPG/tactical gamer. My youngest daughter is my Twitch gamer. My youngest daughter is like the master of Skylanders and all things platforms. But my oldest daughter, she's really into. She said my youngest daughter went out to do cookie sales, and my oldest is like, "Dad, we have some time alone." I said, "What do you want to do? We can, whatever you want to do, we can do it." She goes, "I just want to sit with you and play Skyrim." I'm like, "Okay, twist my arm." And we had a blast. We had a nice little, Sunday afternoon playing Skyrim on the couch. We had a great time. So I don't know. It's kind of a bloody game for a 9-year-old, but she really likes it. So let's see. Blood. Speaking of blood, my Blood Bowl Norse team. Look at that segue. We're now 2 wins and 2 draws in the new season. So I'm pretty happy with how my Norse are doing. And it's tough because for all you Blood Bowl fans out there, you know that the Norse have pretty bad armor. Armor value 7. So no deaths so far. Knock on wood. Everybody's hanging in there.
So armor 7. Does that mean on 2 dice you have to roll a 7 or above?
Well, yeah, but it's based.
If you were, the game's the same exact game as the tabletop
game. Yes, exactly the same, right? Yeah, right. Yep. So that's pretty. Yeah, it's pretty low. So it's pretty easy. Pretty much every other hit should wound somebody somehow, right? Or pretty close to it.
Well, it's better than Imperial Guard armor. Putting that out there.
Yeah, right. Except instead of having 50 guys, you have 11. So
okay. Well, there's that.
You got to keep them in there.
Okay.
And also,
a guy died.
There you go. See. Actually, you roll a penetrant armor and then you got to roll the result. So oftentimes it's not too bad.
I'm teasing.
Let's see. Doing a big RPG fest with the kids. So my brother and his niece and nephew really want to play the fairy RPG. So they're going to come down this weekend, and we're all going to do I'm going to be the GM, and all the kids will be in that. So that's going to be exciting. And then working with a listener from Kentucky, we're going to be working on a Mouse Guard campaign with his kids. He's got a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old, and we're going to play with my daughters, who are 9 and 8, and we're going to play over Connect Video Conference. We're going to see how this works. So, I'm looking forward to that. So that's either going to be this weekend or next weekend. We're working out. They're rolling up the characters now, so that's going to be fun. So I'm becoming the GM to children, apparently, but which is about my speed for storytelling. I'll be honest. And I meant to mention the books, Craig. I have started listening to Citadel.
Yep.
John Ringo's. It's the Troy Rising series, the second book. Have you listened to these yet?
I have not. Well, I've listened.
Or
The
read
first one is Live Free or Die.
Yes,
right?
the first one is Live Free or Die. The second book, I didn't realize there's 2 more out. Somehow I missed it.
Oh, see, he writes so friggin'
I know, because it wasn't Live Free or Die is not that old. It was
it's not. It's
See,
like
if they had a subscription option on Audible, they could have automatically notified you.
Well, they do. I just ignore them.
You go ahead and call Audible and let us talk about the friggin' books, okay?
Right. So, but it was awesome. This book is fantastic, easily as good as the first one. I'm hanging on every minute of the book. I love it. It's definitely a little hard sci-fi, but it reminds me of it's like Tom Clancy in space is totally what these books are.
Although John Ringo, and I love his stuff, but he kind of does that little Nerdvana thing also, where his heroes are like improbable heroes who just happen to have all these awesome skills that are really required when the moment comes.
Well, he's actually bouncing around. He's got 3 main stories going on in this one. So it's not just following the main businessman anymore, but it's cool because you're seeing what happens now, after Live Free or Die has occurred and how all these things that the main character built are now being used.
What's the time lapse between the two?
I think 20 years since is that long? Anyway, Troy's not finished still, and the war is escalating, and now they're dealing with all that. So maybe it's not 20 years, but it's because I forget how much time lapse in the first book. You know what I mean?
Right,
So it's 20 years since the first alien contact, but I can't remember where the first book ended. I'm really, really enjoying it. Highly recommend it. I can't wait for the third one now. I'm just blasting my way through these. So that is my achievements. Is that all of our achievements?
That's all I got.
That's it.
All right, that's achievements.
You're listening to the D6 generation. Born to game.
Oh, you know what that sound means? Time to talk about our friends at Lone Wolf Development.
Lone Wolf Development.
And their awesome products, including Army Builder and Hero Lab and Card Vault. And, Craig and I are in the super secret Realmworks beta. Can't tell you anything about it except it's pretty cool.
We can't tell you anything else.
Yes, but we can tell you about what's new and hot. First of all, the Macintosh version is out for Army Builder and Hero Lab. So if you've been looking for those, take a look. I think they're in the final ends of beta. They should be coming out soon, any moment there. I think Hero Lab is now, OS 10 is out.
Releasing in February,
Yep.
right?
And then also available in Hero Lab is the Arsenal, Augmentation, and Street Magic supplements for Shadowrun. So those are brand new hotness there. And let's see what else. There's more Pathfinder news. Pirates of the Inner Sea has been added to Pathfinder as well there. So, if you want to get a great piece of software that lets you crank out characters for any of your favorite RPGs and most of your favorite RPGs, definitely want to head over and check out Hero Lab. It's very handy for some recent games Craig and I have been playing.
Oh, yes.
Including Savage Worlds, another great hotness. And, I really wish we could tell you more about Realms work, but we just can't. We've been sworn to secrecy. So it's really cool. So head on over to Hero Lab, and if you want to find the latest and greatest on their Twitter feed, which is all the latest hotness and newest supplements coming out, check out at Lone Wolf Devel on the Twitters to see what the latest is. And now, what's in the news? With the shout-out, Flash Duel from Serlin Games. Simple, fast fighting, 1 to 5 players, 20 characters, beloved by Penny Arcade. Order today at serlingames.com. And now, the news. Ticket to Ride for the iPad app actually boosted sales of the Pulp board game. This according to the CEO of Days of Wonder in a recent article reported on pennyarcade.com. Really interesting news, and it's interesting to see all the game companies publishing electronic versions of their games, and it is fascinating, although not necessarily surprising, that electronic versions are actually spurring on the pulp sales. A great read. Head on over to Penny Arcade. Check that out on their new news page. Pretty good stuff over there. Let's see. Other news. The new Dystopian Wars 1.1 rulebook is coming out. It is 25% off initially to help players upgrade to the new book. It does feature new art, new fiction, new layout, as well as a bunch of updated rules. Also, though, if you already have the prior version and would not like to purchase the new version, there is a PDF version for free of the changes available from the SpartanGames.co.uk website. And a special announcement from the D6G crew here. The D6 generation will indeed be at Adepticon 2012 this year, and especially running the Sunday night board game event. Apparently this event was very much loved by all who attended, so Russ and Craig will be there this year doing the same thing with great games to give away from all the major publishers. So hope you can come to Adepticon and check it out with the rest of the crew. In other news, Catalyst Game Labs has announced they will be participating for the first time in Free RPG Day this year. Catalyst will be giving away quick start rules for their Shadow 1 RPG, A Time of War, the Battletech RPG, as well as quick start rules for Cosmic Patrol. Both will include ready-made character sheets and never-before-seen adventures. If you're not familiar with it, Free RPG Day takes place every year in June. This year it's on Saturday, June 16th, 2012. And if you want more information on Free RPG Day, head on over to freerpgday.com. This stuff is awesome. It takes place at your local retailer, and most RPG companies give away all kinds of cool free stuff just for showing up. If you were excited about the WizKids Mage Knight board game but didn't get a copy before it sold out, don't worry. WizKids has just announced the second printing is due out in April. So that's coming soon if you're a Mage Knight fan. And speaking of being a fan of something, I know, pretty weak sauce segue. If you're a Wings of War fan, we have good news for you. Ares Games has announced that Wings of Glory will be available in stores as early as March 7th in the United States and in Europe about a week later. Ares Game has picked up the old Wings of War game from Fantasy Flight Games and is now publishing it as Wings of Glory. Each airplane pack, which includes a pre-painted airplane, this time they're World War II, will be a pre-painted airplane model will be sold for $12.90. The only downside is you'll need either the old Wings of Glory rules to play, because the airplane packs coming out in early March will not have the rules in them, or you have to wait a couple weeks to get the new Wings of Glory starter rule set, which will be available a few weeks after the planes hit the streets. And that's what's in the news. Welcome back, and now we're excited. You know, this was Dan's idea. We're going to give full credit to Dan for this.
Full credit where credit is fully due.
I will take full credit. Thank you.
Indeed.
Never one not to take full credit.
You should. So Dan thought it'd be fun to talk about a segment he's titling "When We Wish Upon a Game, the Publisher Edition." What does that mean, Dan?
So When We Wish Upon a Game is a new erstwhile segment here on the D6 Generation, and it is about how we need to improve the games industry. So, you know, when people are kibitzing around in various discussions and they just go, but why don't they do this? So this is a kind of way to think more formally about that and say, all right, if I could wish, in this case, if I had a wish list for a publisher, what would I wish that publishers would actually do? So we don't usually talk about this in a formal way. We usually just kind of go, I don't like this box cover. So let's actually think about that in a kind of coordinated way.
Ooh, okay, so we're going to give... So this is going to be a regular segment of the show. Dan will be doing it in short bursts, right, Dan?
That's correct.
Yes. But this is sort of the intro to get you all excited. And Craig and I thought it'd be fun to sort of chime in here with some ideas we thought, things that are sort of, I don't know if they're not annoyances so much as just things you always think about, like, why don't they do that? Right?
This is a sneak preview for our most valued and paying listeners.
Okay, so we've all got a few points here. And so who wants to start? Craig, why don't you start off?
Okay.
So what's the first thing you'd like to see sort of
first thing that I like when I open a game, the first thing I would be very disappointed in, or the first thing that I would like to see, would be the quality of the actual components. And when a game, and I understand like a lot of the things we look at, they have, they're just starting out, or maybe they're young companies or small companies. But as an excellent example, the Betrayal at House on the Hill, the new reprinting.
Mm-hmm. Which was not done by a young company, I will point out. It was done by a very established company.
That's not an example of the excuse that I gave. That's an example of my pet peeve that I'm talking
saying
about.
They should know better. They have the resources to make that thing awesome. I was so disappointed.
Absolutely.
See, there you go.
I mean, cardboard that warps. I mean, you need to have really thick card. It doesn't have to be Space Hulk thick or Fantasy Flight linen strong, but it has to be nice, thick cardboard components that don't curl up. I hate when the cardboard on the table curls up. I hate it. Whether it's the game board or whether it's just the individual pieces or cards or character, information sheets or whatever. When they're curling up, I hate that.
Yeah, warped cardboard definitely stinks.
No, it does stink. And then when you go, like, you can tell cheap plastic quality also, like the soft mold line, the soft sculpt lines, and there's not a lot of detail. And if you're going to go with plastic, I think you need to wait and save up your money until you can do it right.
Yeah, and there's so much you can do with just cardstock and cards, and you can make really good quality stuff. And even young companies, because we work with a lot of these every day, even young companies don't really have any excuse because they can go to a printer and say, I want my cards like this, or I want my tiles like this. I mean, Betrayal, if they had just said, we want the tiles to be the same thickness as what the original printing was. It's not like that's a mystery. They're not like, we don't know what they did here. They can actually say, okay, look, here, do it like this. That's exactly what new companies like Stronghold do. They say, we want this to not be like this. We want it to be better than this. And the printers are happy to comply.
Right. And I mean, the key is, plastic's awesome, and I love my bling, but I would rather have really nice cardboard components than really cheesy plastic ones.
Or wood. I'd rather have them do like wooden cubes than bad plastic.
Well, that's a perfect example, actually. There's a new one, Island Fortress, coming out. They originally quoted it as a big cardboard, like, stand-up token for the first player token, basically. And then they overfunded their campaign, so they're also giving you a 4-inch tall purple wooden meeple in the game. So they're giving you both.
Who doesn't need a giant 4-inch purple meeple?
I know I do. So that's good. Well, that's good. So basically, we're saying that there's no excuse for bad components in this day and age, in 2012.
No, and you've got to be smart about the way you deal with it too. If you're gonna, if you don't have the money to go good plastic, then go good cardboard, as Dan said.
And you have to make a good decision there because there is a scale, right? You can't just saying I want good components is like saying I want a cheap price. They're inversely proportional. You have to decide where you can get the best value for what's going to fit the game best. So if we're going to say we want a really good quality of components, we have to be willing to say, hey, we're going to pay a little more if it's a low print run game. Now you see that scale with size, things that, say, Wizards of the Coast would be able to do at, say, the print run of a very popular game that they're reprinting would be a much higher expectation than a new company that's printing 2,000 copies of a game.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah.
But I would rather have a slightly higher price, like a $50 game instead of a $40 game, if it makes the difference of I'm never going to want to play this game again because the components are so bad.
But then you look at a game like Forbidden Island. That game's got fantastic components, and it's what, $18?
Because they printed a huge amount of them, and that's what we should all be striving for. But we can't expect that level of price to quality ratio, but we can at least expect a level of quality at a certain baseline.
Right. And I mean, if the components are so bad you don't want to play it again, then that saving in price is pointless.
It's lost.
Thanks for reminding me to trade in my copy of Betrayal.
No, there you go. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, the new version is not.
It's just not it's a fail.
Oh, I got one. I got one.
Okay, you do yours.
Okay, Dan, why is this? I want release dates.
Do you mean release dates or ship dates or street dates?
I want to just know when I can get my grubby little paws on a game, roughly. It doesn't have to be the day. It doesn't have to be like next Friday or January 17th. But I would like to know that, it's coming out in a month or at least a quarter. Most companies don't even give us that. And the video game industry is pretty decent. I mean, I don't even care if it slips once in a while. That's okay. But I really just want to kind of get a feeling for when I can expect a particular game, to actually be available.
Well, what we've been plagued by in this industry, and this I deal with every day, and most people, it's just invisible. They just go, oh, that game wasn't that game supposed to be out already? Well, there's a huge amount of misinformation because of different territory release dates. Something will release at Essen in October in a year, and it won't come out in the States until 6 months later. But somebody saw on the internet somewhere, which is always correct, that I saw that somebody actually bought that. Oh, well, why don't you have it? I'm speaking, of course, as a store here. Why don't you have it? You must be a schmuck. schmuck and an idiot. And we're like, actually, that's not released in North America, but we'd be happy to reserve it for you and get it as soon as it comes out. No, you're wrong. I saw it on the internet. It's actually available. What we need is a consolidated, there is a company that does this. It's a Games Quarterly Catalog, which no individual would necessarily be aware of, but it's a back end thing. But they're so far behind. They print just the name. Games Quarterly Catalog. They print once a quarter. Right. How are they supposed to give you up-to-date information? It's a print medium. You need a simple database that updates, but that requires that you get all these publishers on board with actually updating information. That's why you see publishers like Fantasy Flight that have just said, forget it. We can't accurately predict when things are going to come out, so we're just going to wait until effectively it's on the boat, on the way here. Stronghold does the same thing. Oh, now we can announce the release date. At least they could do that, right?
Right.
And really the only excuse for why they don't do that is that they're overwhelmed. A lot of small companies, they don't have a guy that's just like, oh, I'm the marketing guy. I'm going to tell you when the release dates are. We find out about release dates as a store days before they come out. Like, oh, hey, by the way, this is going to be releasing on Monday. You've already placed your orders for it.
But even companies like Fantasy Flight don't give actual release dates. Is that because they're afraid of being wrong, or people getting mad at them when it comes out, a month later than they'd hoped?
No, because that's simple math when they're placing a release date. If they're placing a release date like, hey, it's on the boat, it's going to be here, it's going to get through customs. Once it's in their warehouse, there's still 2 to 3 weeks before it actually gets in stores. So the worst case scenario is that they could say, hey, barring some calamity like a hurricane or something, this is going to get to your store, say, on Friday. I've been a big proponent of this for a long time, is basically set. We have Tuesdays for most new media. We have Friday or Wednesdays for comics. Set Friday as this is the official new game day of the week. And the beauty of that is you don't even have to get everybody to comply, because if somebody releases it on Wednesday, somebody releases it on Thursday, you'll still know that you can come in on Friday and get anything that would have released that week. So even if you just said it releases the week of the 27th being the last day of that week, you're not going to be disappointed if you show up on the 25th like, oh, that showed up early. Right. That's what we've been encouraging people to get to. But it's such a simple thing. All they have to do is update their website and say this is what it is. But usually they just leave them out of date. So I don't think there's any really good excuse for that. It's just something that's underappreciated and underwhelming in the industry.
Yeah, I agree. I think a weekly day would be kind of cool, like comics and video games. That'd be awesome. So what's your first one, Dan?
My first one is video and audio support for every title. I do not see why there's not something. Have you guys seen the Forbidden Island trailer that they did? It's like a video, like a movie trailer. It's like 30 seconds.
Yep, I saw that.
So like that took, I don't know, maybe $500 to put together for that company, and it is so nice for, first of all, as a store to be able to kind of show that off in store. But second of all, if you're here about a game, it's so much more effective if you're getting a visual and an audio connection with that game, as opposed to, here's an article, you could read it, and apparently, too long didn't read syndrome sets in when you get to 50 words these days. So if I can get you to watch a 30-second trailer or a 2-minute overview of the game, I think that is increasingly more important. And I don't really even care if it's that good quality. I just want to get to the point where everybody has them. Then I can start harping on people to, hey, increase your quality. It's the same thing with release dates. So those are things that they could do right at development. And that could it fuels your entire marketing campaign. And you see this on Kickstarter. The very first thing that you do, anything on Kickstarter that comes out, they have a video.
Yep.
That's the first thing. And every company should be doing that for every title. Even if it's just the designer grabbing a Steadicam, slitting it on their desk and saying, hey guys, I'm showing you, the air-shipped copy that I got a month in advance, and that's it. And you just put it up on YouTube. It doesn't have to be fancy, but we need that kind of nuggets of data. That's what I like to call them, where it's just like, hey, check it out. How do you find that impacts you guys? Like, do you find that you're more attracted to a game if you can actually get that sort of exposure, whether through audio or, obviously in an audio medium, you share that information with your listeners. But what about videos and stuff?
Craig?
I like, you know what? It's weird. I love watching them if it's a game I enjoy after I've already got it or enjoyed it or I know I like it. But it's not, they don't really catch my attention before the fact for some reason. I don't know. But I haven't seen that many. Most of the ones I've seen were the box openings or the Fantasy Flight ones that are very, very quick flashes of the components and things like that. And that may catch my eye a little bit, I guess, but it's not really a big thing for me. Russ, what about you?
Well, actually, this was on my list. I was hoping to see either training videos online or the mini DVDs, the little small ones, in with the games. Actually, this worked really well for us when I got Kingdom Hearts for my daughter, the card game, back when she was like 5 or 6. And it comes with each starter pack comes with one of those little mini DVDs, and I put it in and we watched it. And she had the rules down after one viewing. In fact, she was correcting me. No, Dad, the lady said do this, this, and this. And they totally nailed it. So it was a really great and easy way that you can sort of, instead of teaching a game, the rules are, one poor person has to sit down, digest all the rules, and then go play them. Now it's a group experience. You get all your friends, you sit down in front of the TV, you'll watch the overview of the game that kind of gives you the rules. And then after that, you go and play the game, and it's a group experience again, and it's not on one person's shoulders to have taught the entire game to everyone. I think that kind of support would be great. And it doesn't have to be super high production values. I mean, some of the new commercials and overview videos you get from Fantasy Flight and Days of Wonder are really, really cool. But not even that. I'm just thinking, and the thing that's funny about this is there's already people doing it out there for free for these companies or next to nothing. There's lots of videocast guys out there with lots of great experience. I'm thinking like Dragon Strike and those guys doing some really, really great work on unboxing and showing the game. And the companies could probably pay these guys very, very little. In some cases, just give them a free game to do it for them and have this stuff out there.
I'm amazed how many publishers you say, hey, because we're in this situation now where we're shipping out promotional copies for companies. And so we say, hey, we want to send a free copy to this guy that does these video overviews. And they're like, I don't know. Is it really worth the cost? And I'm just like, dude, your cost is so minimal. I mean, it's not like there's hundreds of these people out there, right?
Right.
If you set one to every one of the 8 guys that does this,
does it well,
how
right?
is that going to cost you? That's going to get you at least a few more sales. There's, in fact, an entire spectrum of kind of the Forbidden Island really short trailer, all the way up to Watch It Played is a relatively new series,
right.
where they go through the entire game. They show you everything, and they walk you through the entire game. And I like the idea that you have that option, right? That you have, hey, I just want to find out about it just like I would watch a movie trailer. Or I want to watch the extended kind of trailer, the 2-minute trailer.
Right.
Or I want to sit down and actually learn how to play from this. And I think that this can't be, my wife Sarah is always reminding me that this cannot be overstated because Craig, especially you and I think Russ is in this boat too, we learn in a certain fashion. She's a teacher, so she's always talking about learning styles. And we learn, like we read things and we comprehend them. And everything works out great, right? So that works great for us where they're giving us this written rule book and saying, here, read this and process it. But there are so many more people that do not process rules that way. Before you get through the first half of the first page, they've tuned you out, they're not paying attention, where if you put that in a 2-minute video, they would be much more likely to actually learn and pay attention to it.
I agree. And I think, again, it can be very low cost.
I'm very excited about this, I can tell.
I am. So, Craig, what was your second one?
What was my second one? My second one, it goes across all game styles, and that would be edit, edit, edit.
Okay.
Nothing bothers me more than I'm trying to read a rule book and I'm finding just like blatant grammatical errors or spelling errors or typos, the kind of things that really need to be caught by. And you need an editor, and of course, the first thing that you don't buy or you don't pay for when you're a smaller company is an editor. I mean, even larger companies don't. They use a team of writers and have the people vet each other's stuff, and you need to have an editor. You need to have somebody because it's a totally different skill set to sit down and read and focus on that kind of that level of minutia.
Spoken like a true English teacher and editor yourself.
Indeed.
It bugs the crap out of me.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that badly written and badly edited works are definitely hard to get through. And especially when you're trying to, as Dan mentioned earlier, you're trying to process these rules. And you definitely don't want, it's one thing to be reading a book and all of a sudden have some kind of little disjointed sentence or something take you out of the story. But to actually have to try to digest a very complex game, and you're sort of running it through your head as you're reading the rule book, and have it all of a sudden say, boink, I don't even understand what he's trying to say here, and then lose your place sort of mentally. That's a big thing.
Knocks you right out of the mental process of trying to learn how to do something.
Yeah.
Well, the perfect example here that has no excuse is that we just did a session impressions about Power Grid First Sparks, which is a 10th anniversary edition of a game that you would think that the designer and the publisher, Rio Grande Games, would have enough experience to do. I'm really excited about this game. Hey, it's Power Grid in like an hour, and it's like a prehistoric theme, and you've got cavemen. I'm like, oh, that sounds great. It's not as boring as I don't need a calculator. Right. And so I go, okay, let me start playing this. 8 pages of rules. Oh, 8 pages. Great. Not as intimidating. no fewer than 12 spelling, grammatical errors, and the reason for that is that Friedemann Friese speaks very good English compared to the amount of German that I speak. However, he is not a native English speaker.
Right.
And you can tell that when he's translating things. In fact, one of the most important rules in the game, and there's a whole big discussion about why this is totally broken and wrong, but it says, very important. It says, if you do this certain thing in the game, you may have to wait a turn before you can play again. That's not actually what he meant. What he meant was, if you do this, you may lock yourself out of the game and not be able to play for the rest of the game. But because he's converting it into English and he knows what he's talking about, nobody else. No, it's very obvious when you look at this. No English speaker read this over and said, oh, we should just reword that. Like, not even an editor, just like some guy that's like, here, Joe down at the coffee shop, read this. Can you understand it? No? Okay, we need to change something. And when you look at it, there is no, that's a huge franchise, Power Grid. They've sold over 150,000 games. They can't afford a freaking editor? You're kidding me. Like that's what we're going to hold up as, look at this great game. It's ridiculous.
Dan, where's the outrage? That's what I want.
I also have an English degree, I will point out. And there is nothing more frustrating than, like, I can understand people make mistakes, whatever, that's fine in conversation.
Right. That's the key. The key is people make mistakes. You have to hire somebody who's got that mindset that can just, like, look at stuff and just find the mistakes. You need that.
Right.
You can't just have somebody, you can't just turn to another person in the office and go, okay, now you edit it.
Yeah,
right.
And you're going to do such a better job. And it's such a low expense. That's what I look at from kind of a business standpoint. I'm just like, if you could at least say about your games that they had no more than like 1 or 2 grammatical errors in, a 16-page rule book, that's acceptable. No, I would strive for 0, but but 12 in 8 pages?
Yeah, yeah. There's no, especially in the smaller books. You'd think the small ones, the would be just safe from that because you'd be easy to read them over several times.
I think that's the trap they fall into. They go, oh, it's small. We couldn't have possibly made that many mistakes. Well, anybody who's done any sort of writing and editing knows that even a 500-word thing could have 16 errors in it. You got to read it over and have an editor go through it.
Well, mine's sort of about rules. I would like to see, once you get them all edited well, I would like to see them posted online. I think most companies are getting better about this, and I do like that Fantasy Flight in particular is really good about this. They get the rules up actually before the game launches. The actual PDF files are up there. But I really think every game should have its rules online prior to being available in stores, just so you can get a feel for it and really understand the game.
Yeah, I think one big benefit of that is Forbidden Alchemy from Fantasy Flight Games, from Mansions of Madness.
Yes.
If, for instance, and again, we see this with pre-production, things like Kickstarter, they put their rulebook out. It's not a final rulebook. It says rules version 0.7. Right? And now you don't just have one person editing it. You have hundreds of people reading those rules, finding mistakes and saying, hey, this is wrong, because people on the internet love to tell you that you're wrong. If they had just put that book up in advance, it's not like they're hiding anything secret, right? I'm talking like 2 months in advance, just before it's printed, say, hey, we're going to give basically a month for people to read it, ask questions, fix things. They could have saved themselves an inordinate amount of cost, recalling all those games, replacing things by just going, oh, crap, we didn't include the right components for this because or the worst instance where it says, I get these questions all the time, hey, I think I'm missing a piece, when they're not actually missing a piece. It's just a typo in the rule book under components.
Ooh, what if they did this? What if they put the rules up before they've gone to the printer, so they're up there early, and then they said, if you find a mistake that we actually have to fix, we'll send you a promo card with your order of the game.
I think you could do that, but I don't even think it's necessary. I think
that
if
would
you just
solve all these problems, editors and everything. You'd have the entire, you'd be crowdsourcing editing.
I think there's there's potentially more cost in coordinating that sort of thing than there is in getting a good editor. I think you want both. But second of all, I don't think you even need to pay people. I think just saying, hey, you're going to get to check the rules out in advance. And by the way, hey, and this ties into a later thought that I have, but hey, let's give you some sort of recognition. It might not be a promo card, but maybe it's a digital badge on our message boards, which Fantasy Flight has the option to do, that sort of thing.
Awesome editor, like micro badge, like Board Game Beat that thing or something.
Yeah.
There you go. All right, so that's mine, getting the rules online there. Dan, what's your second one there?
Well, my second one kind of ties into my sixth one. I didn't really write these in numerical order.
Sorry, we may not get to your sixth one, so why don't you just go ahead and lump it in there.
So the idea of, this actually ties into the rules, the idea of having like a toolbox, right, that like I subscribe to a game, then hey, I like Seven Wonders. I would like to know when there's anything related to Seven Wonders available. Hey, new expansion coming out? I want to find out. Hey, I want to log how many plays of Seven Wonders I've done. I want to tell other people that I like Seven Wonders. I want to see wallpapers for Seven Wonders. I want to get little icons for Seven Wonders for my desktop. I want to put an iPhone, wallpaper on my thing. Any of that stuff can be done through what I call like a toolbox. So imagine it was an app or just a website, a very kind of Spartan website that would say, hey, you just click a little thing that says you subscribe, or you just go to that page and there's all these resources. Things like wallpapers, there's no reason that artists should not have those at the same time.
But isn't this really, Board Game Geek is half of what you just described, right?
No, but the problem there is that, first of all, it's not publisher driven. So it's like, hey, you have to filter through all the crap that's on there of, oh, this guy thought that this wallpaper would be cool, but it's actually not the official art.
Right,
I'm talking about the publishers saying, hey, graphic designer, when you output all the files for this, just spend 2 hours and output those same files, but output them in a variety of like wallpaper formats, icons, and then you're talking about the toolbox being something a little simpler, because I'm using the BGG toolbox right now, the app,
right.
And it is not, it's like, they have 6 different ways to say whether you want what stage of ownership. If you say, do I own it or do I want to buy it? There's a wish list that says, I want this a lot. And then there's a separate thing that says buy or don't buy. Why wouldn't that just be a slider that says, I like this so much that I want to buy it? Or just say, I like this so much I already own it. Those are all just kind of simpler things. But from a basic digital aspect, you can get into the simple things like I sit at my desktop a lot. A lot of us in the tech industry work at our computers, whether it's an iPhone or a laptop or whatever. We like the idea of being ensconced in that world. If it's like, oh, hey, imagine that new release list that you have now has, hey, by the way, here's wallpapers for all that new stuff that's coming out so that you can get excited about it. Also in that same toolbox, they could upload the rules, the official rules, just like they do on BGG now, but in one place. Hey, check it out. Now you can have that all in one source and have stuff that you don't have, like wallpapers and avatars and badges that just aren't done in a cohesive way across the industry. And then you can get cool things that are kind of optional, like soundtracks, where it's, hey, Flying Frog does this, but there's no reason that you couldn't get some other cool music, or even if it's just, hey, here's some music we recommend that you listen to. It's not a soundtrack. Cool. And with the way digital is done these days, you could download it on your iPhone. You could just play it off a web page while you're playing. It's so easy to do that there's really no good excuse for why they don't have that level of support.
All right. That's a good one. I like that. See, back to Craig. Craig, what's your number 3?
Well, I'm looking at what all you guys are putting down here and what you're running up the flagpoles. And I'm going to say when I buy a game, I go into a store, I go into a fine establishment like Myriad Games, I put down some cold hard cash, some hard-earned cash for a nice cardboard box that's heavy in my hands and full of components. I don't want to go to the internet, okay? I don't want to go to Twitter. I don't want to go see videos. I don't want to go get little badges or micro badges or major badges or macro badges. I don't give a crap. I just want to play a game. I don't want to go to the game next week and say, hey, and hear, oh, dude, we're playing the 3.7 rules that we found on BGG and blah, 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 blah. I want the game to be the game.
So you want a complete game that doesn't change?
I want, well, and this is because we're not going to get into all of these because because Dan clearly did not have decaf coffee on his way to your house.
Dude, he's drinking hot chocolate, dude. That's like double decaf.
Yeah, well, see, there you go.
Double not decaf.
I'll tie this in. I love micro expansions. I love expansions. What I don't want is I don't want to have to go to multiple media centers for this game experience. I want to buy the game. I've got the stuff. I play the game. I bring it every Tuesday if that's when we're playing, and everybody, we're in a kick where everybody's playing. And I don't want people to be like, "Oh, dude, did you see this? Because online the designer now has these new rules." Like happens with Quarriors. Like every week there's like a new rule set. Oh, the designer came out on Board Game Geek and said he didn't really like the way it was actually was printed. Was not the rules he wanted, and these are the new rules. So you sit down and you have like 40K third edition syndrome. You're like, what are the FAQs? What version are we playing this time? And I don't like it. I don't like it. Yeah, I don't want to have to go online. I want to play a board game on a board that came out of the box and is exactly what it says. I don't feel the need to go online to look at the rules early. I don't want to go look at the movies. I don't want to see a film of what it takes to unbox it.
But don't you want to know before you put your hard-earned money down? Don't you want to be able to view the rules and see if it's worth your hard-earned money?
That's why I go to Myriad, because they've got a copy and I can see people playing it. And I am a visual learner.
Right.
Okay, but I am a real-time, face-to-face visual learner. I don't really learn by watching videos, and I don't get a sense of whether I'm going to enjoy something or not by going online and reading things and things like that.
Well, I don't think anybody's really, I mean, all of those things that we mentioned, that toolbox, right, those are all supplementals that are not like, hey, that's one of the problems with BGG, as you point out, right, is that there's a million variations and whatnot. If it's like, hey, you got this thing, imagine you open your box, everything's in there, it's the game you want to play, there's a little thing that says, hey, do you want more kind of supplemental stuff? Do you want to find out about this game? Do you want wallpapers, et cetera? Go to this URL. You never have to go to there. You could throw it away. But if you want to get more into the game, you could go, oh, they have some soundtrack recommendations, or they have wallpapers, or they have, a cool like subscription thing where I can find out about new stuff, or they have videos, right? You don't need any of that. But I think having a centralized resource, and they have this on a lot of sites like Fantasy Flight, if there's a new set of rules for Fantasy Flight, it'll be up on Fantasy Flight's website. You don't have to go troll around somewhere in some hidden forum.
Right, that's true.
And you're not trying to replace the experience of learning face-to-face. I think that's a key part of tabletop face-to-face games. But if you could say, if you have these tools that can enable you to say, oh, you just walk into your local store, and they're doing a preview night where they're showing the game off. Because these tools exist to allow you to coordinate that, those could be entirely invisible to a consumer like you, Craig. But then if Russ wants to subscribe to that, months in advance and be like, oh my God, the release date updated, every 3 days, he can do that without really impinging upon
where are Will and I got to find these squee-worthy bits of information, Craig, if we don't have these crazy things?
I don't like it.
All right. So Craig's saying, keep it simple. We don't need all this high-tech crap, right? That's
I think the internet should be crashed.
Okay, well, there you go. Well, I just added my fourth one based on something Dan said, and or third. What am I on? Third, fourth? I don't remember where I am. And that is Twitter. So what frustrates me is that what Dan was talking about, the apps, right? So I agree with you, Craig. I want it to be self-contained, right? I want the self-contained game, but I do like these ideas of following up. I like the fact that board games are sort of becoming like miniature war games in a way that they can expand and they grow, and there's always more stuff. And if you really, really like it, there's always more to learn. I like that, Spartan Games refines their rules. There's always new rules to check out, new ways to play. And I like that for my board games too. But what I really like about Twitter is if companies are on Twitter, it sort of becomes that centralized place I can look and see what the latest information is. If Fantasy Flight's coming out with a new expansion, Descent 2 is coming out next week. It's not. But when they tweeted that, I could freak out about it and get all excited. And that's great. And it's also great is a lot of these companies, which is really surprising, you can actually tweet something like, really, really bummed, I just got my copy of whatever, and I didn't find, it was missing one piece, that was sad. And, companies like Privateer Press will actually respond to your tweet saying, sorry to hear that, here's the link, go there, we'll hook you up with a fixed piece. You're not even really talking to the company directly, they just monitor the feeds, they have people actually work to look for problems and solve problems. I think I told this story before once where my daughter wrote on her whiteboard with a bad expo marker, and it started doing weird things. And she just tweeted that. She's like, I had this expo marker, did weird stuff. I don't know how to get off the board now. And literally, with 2 minutes later, Expo replied to her tweet. It was like, here's what you do. Use this material, rubber, let's win. She's like, oh my God, it worked. So that's really what's really, really cool about some of this stuff. And it'd be great, I think, if more companies were on Twitter and had some social media coordinators who actually monitored some of this stuff and kept the information live. I think it'd be great because it would be great if there were other game companies actually monitor. There's a couple that do a good job of it. Fantasy Flight's getting much, much better about it, but most of them don't even look at Twitter, don't even know what it is, or they have a Twitter account, but they don't even read it or post anything on it.
But wouldn't you need to be paying somebody just to watch Twitter?
Yeah, they're called social media or content.
Most companies
managers.
most limited card companies have that. Yeah.
So my two-part response to that is it shouldn't be beyond the ken of the customer if they need something.
I love it.
It shouldn't be beyond their idea that I have no idea that if I need a replacement part, I should reach out directly to the customer or to the company. They should have the basic things like, hey, you can email us, you can call us, right? Pick up the phone. It doesn't need to be like, you could text our special customer support guy, or you could, if they're on Twitter, that's great. If they purport to have a presence on Twitter, they should pay attention to it. Mm-hmm. But if you don't get a response on one thing, because I deal with this all the time, like, oh, I messaged you on Facebook, why didn't you reply? Well, probably because I was busy answering 200 emails and taking 30 phone calls. So I think that's a great kind of instant response for companies that get to that size. Right. I think if you don't get that instant response, it's not unreasonable to expect a customer, especially in a size industry this size, that to reach out and say, they shouldn't then, if you get that response, that's awesome. But if you then go on Twitter and say, oh my, OMG, it's been 30 minutes and I haven't gotten a reply from Expo, WTF, that's a totally unreasonable response.
I think the key is, it's not that people go to Twitter to expect responses from companies. they're just on Twitter venting or talking about whatever to their friends, saying, "I can't believe this." What ends up happening, though, in marketing circles, they talk about this as the magic moment. What ends up happening is you can turn a complaint into a corporate magic moment. By all of a sudden, what was my wife, basically complaining about an Expo marker incident suddenly turned into, isn't Expo an awesome company? I wasn't even complaining to them. She wasn't going to take the time to write a letter to Expo or find their email address. She wasn't really even that upset about it. I was just like, okay, you believe this happened? And there they made it into wow, when I'm at the store looking at a marker, I'm probably going to pick Expo next time because I know they just have that much, customer care and product care. So I think if companies can get to that level where they can be out there reaching out, not every small company obviously can do this, but certainly larger companies where they've already got guys who monitor forums and they're moderators and they're doing that kind of stuff. You can certainly have a community manager who keeps an eye on the Twitter feed, that kind of stuff. And just you don't have to get every single customer. You don't set the expectation. You do it all the time, but just be there at least with the new releases and keeping things up to speed.
And as long as you define from a company standpoint what your modes of communication are, like if people are like, why aren't you on Second Life? Why aren't you on Friendster? Why aren't you on MySpace? It's like, listen, we use Twitter, Facebook, email, and phone, and that's already 3 more than what we used 15 years ago. We have lots of ways to communicate. And then you absolutely do have to monitor those things and stay up to date. So I think it is a good kind of positive turnaround. Like you should have that experience anyway. If you walked into a store and you just mentioned offhand, my thing wasn't really, the way I wanted it to be. The customer service representative or whatever the person that's working should pay attention to that. This is just a digital extension of that sort of thing. So I think it can be good as long as the expectations of the customers are not unreasonable.
You need to set the expectations. So what's your third one there, Dan?
My third one is to release games. That ties into your idea that you like expansion in games and kind of continuing content. And the more I think about how I experience games, the more I think about how I experience other media, whether it's graphic novels or whether it's a TV show or movies. I like the idea that, sure, certain games are just going to be, there's that game, it's done, it never needs another expansion or anything. That's fine. But if there are games that are defined like Descent, hey, wouldn't it be great if there were new monsters or new options for that? Rather than saying, hey, we're going to release an expansion kind of on a unannounced schedule, do it like you do a TV show and say, hey, we're going to do a season of releases. Maybe it's one base game and like 3 expansions, and they're going to come out at approximately these intervals. Gets that release schedule thing. I mean, living card games are the epitome of this. It's, hey, their promise is about once a month, which ends up being every 3 to 7 weeks, but about once a month, we're going to give you a little new content. And so you could play Lord of the Rings, the card game, with just the base game and never play anything again, and that's fine. You could play just that. But if you like it, like I do, and you want to subscribe every, and just kind of stay up to date, that is a really cool experience. And the same thing applies for miniatures. Like if you could say, hey, I want to check out, I don't necessarily want to buy, but I want to check out every Federated States unit that comes out. And if you could automatically, this is what we do in the stores. We have a kind of a flexible reservations, we call it. So you can just say, hey, I want to check those out. We can reserve them, have you see them in person, and then decide if you want to pick them up. And that, I think, is a really cool way to do it. They just need to be better about painting the broad strokes of when those releases are going to happen.
Right. Okay. What do you think, Craig?
I like it. Well, that ties in with that whole, I love micro expansions.
Yeah, I do too.
Like it'd be really cool if they just did, instead of once a year they do a giant $60 Descent dump on you. It'd be really cool if it was every 2 or 3 months there's a little one, maybe $20, and it's just got some monsters or whatever.
Yeah, you got to give FFG credit.
It keeps it alive.
Yeah, they're experimenting with this kind of stuff, right? They have those little print on demand almost card expansions for some of their games. So you can tell they're sort of playing around in that area, so it's kind of neat.
Well, and I think the next step for that is not saying right now they do it under the old model of announcing and releasing. You don't go into a season of Castle saying, I wonder if there's going to be a next episode, right? You know that there's going to be 26 episodes or whatever. They should do that and say, listen, we're going to announce a year in the future. We're going to say, we have these plans. We're not going to tell you exactly when they're coming out, but we're saying that at some point we're going to release in season 1, we're going to release this, and then we're going to release these 3 other things. Because that's all they have to do. They're already doing it. Why not just say, hey, Death Angel, season 1 was the Space Marine pack and the mission pack. Season 2, we released the Tyranid pack. In Season 3, you can look forward to this. Just a little teaser so that you know when you're playing the game, you're not playing just for now, you're playing for the future as well. And half of the fun of these things is anticipation. It's, I'm going to watch the next episode of Castle. I'm going to watch the next, Star Wars movie, whatever it is.
Right.
That's the anticipation. I think that's what you like, Craig, in some part is like, you can appreciate that in the future. And they're missing that marketing opportunity right now because they're just going, hey, did you see that thing come out? Like, they can't even announce when it's actually releasing. They need to be saying, in the future, this is going to come out. And then it's kind of a soft release leading up to an actual hard release.
Well, I like it. I like that a lot.
I like it.
So, okay, we're going to run out of time here. So let everybody do one more. So, Craig, what is your... Well, this way we can save some for Dan's segment. So we won't use them all.
Okay, there you go.
Trust me.
I'm sure
I
Dan's got
plenty.
Dan doesn't seem like he's running out of steam anytime in the near future.
Okay. What do you got, Craig? What's your fourth?
I'm going to go with, and it sounds like it might be the same as editing, but it's not. Clarity and elegance of rules, design, and writing is what I enjoy. A rule book, and we're talking board games here, so I'm liking nice, concise, like 16 pages. I like if it's got a little wit to it, something that'll keep me interested and amused as I'm reading. But I like when it's clear, it's obvious to me what's going on. It's simple but elegant, so that there's a depth to it once you understand it, and sort of the depth of the game itself unfolds in its strategy and the way the components and the more simple rules start to mesh and go together for strategy and tactics. I prefer that to like a 30-page rule book that's and then 3 of these equal 2 of those, and 1 of those will go over here if you're on the blue dial, but the yellow dial, blah, blah, blah. So I really, really appreciate and enjoy and look for clarity and elegance in rule writing.
Oh,
and when it's not there, I get really annoyed, and I get really bored really fast with poorly written rules, and that I don't understand. Like, if that guy's right, like, what's adjacent? You didn't tell me what adjacent is. Is it adjacent? Is it diagonal? I don't know. So
you're gonna add the Wakeland rider on there about indexes and table contents.
Well, I do have
that's a given.
Indexes and what did I put it under? I put it under indexes and quick reference.
Yeah, those are both on mine actually too. So I'll just go right. Yeah, I had index and table of contents, which I always complain about on the show, so I won't regurgitate all that. But one thing that just dovetails into your comment, Craig, is the quick reference cards. Why? No game.
This sounds like it's coming from recent experience.
No game does this, and it frustrates me to no end. A lot of games tell you, here's a turn order on a quick reference card. And a lot of games have starting hand size, but none of the games ever put the starting hand size on the turn card. You always got to go to the book. And the problem is every game's got a different starting hand size. It's 4 in this game. In Ticket to Ride, it's 5 in Rune Wars. Who knows? I don't remember what they all are.
In Champions of Who's It, it's just roll a D6 and that's your starting hand size.
There you go. Well, at least that could be on the card. So I'm thinking, I want that. I want, your quick reference card should have the turn sequence on it. Should be very clear. And if you have a hand, please put the starting hand size on the quick reference card. I don't know how many times that frustrates me, but it frustrates me all the time.
You could put it in a silhouette of a hand so people know what it is.
Whatever it takes, maybe. I just want it on the card. No, can you think of a game that actually does that? None of them do.
No, there are some that I've played recently. I just can't think of it.
They never say it on the card. It's really frustrating.
Oh, you mean the hand size part?
Yeah, see, they don't. They say but they never tell you the starting hand size.
The closest I've seen to that is saying at the start of your turn you draw like 5 cards, and so that's the starting hand size. Even one of my favorite games, Summoner Wars. Okay, there's like 4 steps in Summoner Wars. It's so simple. And then the last step is like draw, or the first step is draw your cards. It doesn't tell you how many to draw to. Right there, it doesn't say just draw 5 cards.
It should say draw 5 cards. It says draw.
Well, is it a static or is it modified by things in the game?
No, because it's a 2-player game.
There's no units that say draw an extra card.
No, and even if they did, it should say draw 5 plus bonuses or something. You know what I mean? Like, how hard is that?
I'd get kind of wordy if it said or something.
But the card is so simple. I mean, you look at Summoner Wars, there's nothing on that card. Anyway, that's my peeve right now. Besides the index and table of contents, it's starting hand size should be easy to spot.
And I think if you want to look at an example of how a lot of these elements of conveying the rules in good design, if you look at your recent Eclipse from last episode, 2 episodes ago, that does a very good job with a lot of those. All they have to do is do the rest of it, right? Is add how many cards you draw or whatever, how many ships you get or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. That'd be great. So that was my 4th one. Dan, what do you got for number 4 there?
All right, so my last one is, let's see, I have so many here. I'm just going to go with the idea of studios versus publishers. So if you're at all passingly familiar with the video game industry, you know that it's very much the studio is kind of the creative content the content creator. They make the stuff, they design it all, they develop it, but then they go to a publisher who does the marketing, the production, they make sure it's all kind of handled well, and they also finance it. So in this industry, we don't need as much money up front, but what we need is the expertise of certain publishers. So you need people that actually can do, like if one guy is doing all the stuff that we've just asked, right, one publisher, and all these other studios are like, I don't think I need to do point number 4. It's so hard to convince every single individual person who wants to publish a game that they should do all of these things. But if you found a really high quality publisher and you said, hey, look, they can just do these things for all their games, because now it's just a production rule. It's like we put tables of contents in our books, period. They don't have to go convince every designer, hey, Reiner, I think you should really put a table of contents. And Reiner's like, no, I do not think that is a good idea because...
Is that what Reiner sounds like?
I've interviewed him a couple times to go listen to.
Dan
to Reiner at knizia.de is actually his email address. I just sent him an email the other day.
Oh, I hope he wanted that published.
But it's on his website.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So, but the idea that you have this... So many people want to make their own games. We all have this thing inside of us, just like everybody wants to write their own novel.
Right.
And so many of us has this, I'm going to make a game. It's going to be easy. Look at all these people. And I see a proliferation of this because of Kickstarter. I see people going, well, that game made $75,000. I could do that. Yeah, but would you make a good game? Because the 5% of the project that is actually designing and developing the game meets up with the 95% of it, which is doing all the crap that we just talked about, plus like 80% of the other stuff that we didn't even talk about. That's just basic warehousing and shipping and customer service and all that stuff. That's what we need a blend of in this industry if we're going to actually be, because what we have right now is a bunch of cottage industries, a bunch of studios that do half-assed work, and then they come up and they go, no, this is really good. And if we're trying to expand our industry, we don't need pretty good. We don't need really good. We need amazing. And the only way we're going to get to that is by standardizing the level of service that we require, by finding publishers that are actually going to do this sort of thing, and then getting studios to partner up with them. And this is exactly what people like Reiner do, where they go to studios and they say, I want you to do this. But we don't even have, right yet, a industry standard level of quality that you would look at and say, across all borders, this is the standard stuff that you can see. And that's what we need to get to as an industry if we're going to not only please our current customers and get them to spend more money on our entertainment, but also to get new customers in. So, thinking of yourself as a studio, as a designer, as opposed to I'm going to be a publisher when you have no freaking clue all of what that entails, and you're probably not going to do that good a job of it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It would be great if there was a go-to publisher. Craig, what do you think of that?
It seems neat. I mean, it works in other industries. It seems like it would be definitely a way to go to get more interesting content, more interesting games out there, a stronger industry.
Yeah, that is the video game and movie industry.
Yeah,
standard, right?
And one of the big arguments against that is that they don't want to consolidate. It's like they look at it and they go, well, just EA owns everything now, right? Well, it doesn't have to be like Fantasy Flight owns everything. You could have Stronghold Games and Fantasy Flight Games and Z-Man Games and Rio Grande Games if they could all just agree based on, customer basically requirements of if you don't do this in your game, you are not a real game publisher. And once we can establish that kind of public persona of what a game publisher should do, then we can actually say, okay, great, you can have lots of different publishers, but it's not going to be as many as the disparate number of studios that we have now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that makes sense. So that was Dan's fourth one. Is that everything? Is that our? Do we all do four?
I think so. Yeah.
That's it. Well, thank you, Dan, for that excellent segment concept. When you wish upon a gamer.
As you can see, there's plenty of material here to be mined.
There will. Yes. So, Dan, would you like people to send emails for ideas for your future segment?
Sure.
Or are you so chock full you can't even handle it?
No, I'm always open to ideas. I used to write an article. I would get emails all the time. So you can send that to Dan at myriadgames.com. And if you can't spell that, it's MYRIAD games.com. And that's the best way to get a hold of me, either Dan or Myriad at myriadgames.com. But yeah, I definitely look forward to hearing people's feedback. This, as we said, was the publisher edition of When You Wish Upon a Game. But we're interested in just anything, like, oh, I don't like it that this store doesn't do this. I don't like it that gamers do this. We always talk about these things, but if we actually talk together about them in an organized fashion, we can perhaps come up with some sort of method forward for fixing those problems, as opposed to just grousing.
Not just complain, but actually try to offer different ways to do it.
For instance,
better ways.
as we just did throughout this
As
segment.
we just did for the past 45 minutes. Excellent. Well, thank you, Dan.
Thank you, guys.
Dan.
Worlds to conquer, foes to vanquish, violence to sow, and medieval crops to reap. The whole world of gaming at your fingertips. The D6 generation. Born to game.
Oh, Vic the Viking's coming.
Vic the Viking's on his way. And that's right. It's time to talk about thewarstore.com. They are one of the best stores you can go to in the net. Personally, my absolute favorite. And they've been bringing the war to your door since 1999 with the best prices on the net and awesome service. And I would tell anybody who would sit still long enough for me to tell them, I would tell them that long before this podcast was a twinkle in Russ Wakeland's eye. They were awesome to me back when I was nobody, and now I'm nobody point two. So anyway,
One of my favorite things to do is to check out the latest news in the gaming industry. There are lots of news sites, but what I like to watch is the War Store on Twitter. So if you go to @the War Store on Twitter, you can see the latest tweets. Like, you probably know that, or did you know that the Dystopian Wars rulebook version 1.1 is available for pre-order on the War Store? Boom. There it is. Just came out. Whole new version of Dystopian Wars. So if you weren't watching anything else, just follow your Twitter feed. Oh my gosh, there's a new version of Dystopian Wars coming out. Or how about you can start pre-ordering the March
Arms, the Starfleet main rulebook.
Right. It's in stock again. How about getting those latest Mantic releases? They're all there on their Twitter feed. So definitely follow Vic the Viking over at the War Store on Twitter to get the latest information, or head on over to their website just to see all the stuff right there in stock on a pretty little paper.
Yeah, and for those of you who are going to be close down to the Colonial GT, they will be there on March 30th and April 1st.
Sweet.
So go to the Colonial GT website for more information on that.
One of my favorite things about the War Store, they get to those tournaments, they support the gamers, and have all great selections of products, even at smaller venues.
All
it's great.
over the place.
Indeed.
Yep, absolutely.
Thewarstore.com.
All right, well, welcome to another edition of the Hollywood Minute. I'm Rafe Hollywood Granger, and today's Hollywood Minute is brought to you by Viva Java, a refreshing blend of Euro-style flavor for 3 to 8 players. Pledge on Kickstarter or pre-order at shop.gamesalute.com. Fresh, hot cup of Euro-style coffee. Can't wait. All right, well, it seems like it's been about 100 million years since I've talked to all you guys. This is what's on today's agenda. I've got SWTOR, or Star Wars The Old Republic versus Latro, in Rafe's head. We've got Batman comic review. We've got Realmworks and Mouseguard. We've got Mouseguard play sessions. We've got World War II and Flames of War and the pub. You know what? Let's start with the pub. I had so much fun last night. I was planning on going out with some buddies of mine. I found an old historical bookstore down in Exeter, New Hampshire called Colin Phone. I don't even know what that means. And he specializes in World War I aviation. But I went in and I asked him if he had anything on the M5A1 Stuart, as I've been reading up on Flames of War. And apparently somebody just dropped off a whole bunch of books, and so there was a whole bunch of great books on armor, and I just wanted to lounge around, but I had my kids with me, so I thought, who better to lounge around in the store than with Matt Alex, Stino who bailed, Dave who bailed, Andy who bailed, and then it was me and Matt and Brian Ahern. And the plan was afterwards, after we just farted around in that bookstore for like an hour, going through all the old books, that we would then hit a pub and just, hang out and talk gamer stuff. So that's what we did. And I picked up a couple books. I picked up some tech manuals on the World War II tank destroyers. I picked up more like not a novel, but a book the size of not a technical book about, I think it was the 561st. I don't have it in front of me. Engineer Battalion and their exploits in near the Battle of the Bulge and over the Rhine River and stuff like that. And that sounded pretty cool. And I picked up a book on World War II uniforms, United States. So that was really cool. Matt found some really cool books, including some with some maps in the back. And they just had lots of reading material on Panzers and Panthers and a lot of German armor. It was very cool. Then afterwards, we went to this pub that I found about a year ago, and it's in Newmarket, New Hampshire, and it's called the River Tavern, and it is I don't know. You just go downstairs, a lot of brickwork, a lot of stonework, a lot of big, broad oaken beams, and it just it's the modern day version of a Hobbit tavern, which was just wicked cool. And so the three of us just hung out there. We had great beer, fresh brewed beer. We had wings, we had soups, we had dessert, and then we played haggis, and then a couple other 45s and a modification of euchre. We just played card games into the night. Just a really good time hanging out with friends in the pub. Loved it. Speaking of World War II, so Flames of War, 3rd edition, the mini book is out. If you've got your hardcover 2nd edition, you can go in for free. That's what I love about Flames of War. You can go in for free. They give you the little mini book. So they're all about, letting you get into the new rules. It's not about getting the new rules as an excuse to get you to buy more books. And you know what? They don't have to anyway, because each codex, if you're using 40K terms, doesn't go into the rule lists anyway. So the rules are the same from the main rule book, and then you can play whatever list you want. Like I'm still playing my U.S. lists out of Tide of Iron, and I love it. Whereas Andy's playing out of the new Russian front books, which is the Russian book, something Bear, and the other hardcover, which deals with the German forces, which I'm drawing a blank. So anyway, my point is that with Flames of War, if you ever want to get into it, now's the time. Get yourself, I think the full hardcover with all the fluff and everything's coming out probably in about 2 weeks from when you hear this. I'm definitely getting that in addition to the mini book. And it's a good time. They've cleaned up some rules. They've streamlined some things. They've changed some things just to make things a little easier. For example, I like to run armored infantry. And in the old rules, if you had a half-track that was on the table and it was destroyed, that counted against your morale check. Now that's not the case anymore. So if your half-track gets destroyed, it doesn't go against your platoon morale. So you're not losing things at a 5+ save and then it's causing your guys to break and run. Really cool. Enjoying 3rd edition. Got a game in already under 3rd edition rules. Had a fun time, played Andy's Russians, looking to get a lot more. Mouse Guard play session. So hey, a bunch of you have been emailing me. You're really liking the Mouse Guard recorded sessions. You're going to kill me because we had a blast about 2 weeks ago, and I meant to put the recorder on, and I didn't. I do want to get some more recorded sessions up there for you guys. It was really good. I got to tell you, I'm playing with professionals here. We've got Doc, we got Silverman, we got Angelo, we have a new player, Christine, we have Moss. These guys really know how to get into character, really know the Mouse Guard backstory, and man, they are just having fun. I mean, I just push them in the right direction, and they just take it and go. Now, what's really cool is we're playing over Skype, which leads me to, I'm very excited to announce that I am in the Realm Works beta. Now, listen, as much as I want to talk to you guys about this, I can't. I'm under the auspices, the protections, the gag order of an NDA, but I do want to say that I am testing it in beta. I'm excited to be part of the beta, and it's an exciting time. And so hopefully keep your eyes on Lone Wolf and Realmworks, and when the NDA is lifted, I'll have a lot to to share with you guys. I'm very proud and pleased to be part of it. Batman. So I'm a Batman fan. I'm a Batman fan from back in the Frank Miller days. Anytime I see an artist, which, by the way, there's a couple DC artists that are drawing and writing their own stories. I love that. I love when an artist and a writer write their own stories. It's great. The same person. So anyway, I think I'd mention this to you. There's Batman Noel and another Batman called Through the Looking Glass. Now these are Batman thrust into the story of the first one is Alice in Wonderland, and the second one is not the Grinch. What the heck is that guy? Tiny Tim. I keep wanting to say the Grouch. I can't think of it, but Scrooge. It's that story, and so they spin this tale, but at the same time it coexists in a modern Batman world, and the writers do a fantastic job. The art is unbelievable, especially through the Looking Glass. Very interesting, kind of bizarre, stylized art. I highly recommend that if you're a Batman fan, or if you haven't collected comics. Both of these are sold in just hardbacks. Or if you haven't collected comics in a while and you just kind of want an excuse to buy something but don't necessarily want to collect, I recommend these two books. Very pleasurable eye candy and very fun reads and just very interesting takes. Now, weird thing occurred, okay? Star Wars The Old Republic. Awesome game. Can't say enough about it. You've already heard me say so much about it. But just as life seems to go on and pull you in different directions, I started to miss my old pal Stoney. I hadn't logged into my Dwarf Guardian in like 8 weeks. No, more than that, like 3 months. And I started to miss my pals in the kin. There's about 5-6 of us that have gotten to know each other. As a matter of fact, last Adepticon, I'm kind of sad I'm not going to Adepticon this year, not only for the awesome convention that it is, but also gave me an excuse to meet 3 of my kinmates who happen to live in the Chicago area. And, I just missed, hanging out with them on air and playing with them and doing some endgame instas and stuff. So just having a blast with Stoney again. I'm not endgame yet, 75 level. I'm only level 71. The best epic storyline ever. I mean, again, Star Wars is great. I'm not, you can't complain, okay? It's just, but right now, I'm working my way through Isengard, and at one point you actually get double-crossed on one of your quest lines, and you get thrown into a prison. And you do this whole, at least 10 to 15 quests as a prisoner of Isengard. And then your rewards as you go through are prison garb. So you get like a baklava, you get a prisoner shirt with a white paw on the back, white hand, you get dirty little rag feet and, slippers. And, oh man, just the concept of getting such a cool cosmetic outfit is just cool. I mean, that's what Latro's about. I mean, 25% of us play it just for the cosmetic wear alone. So it's really been fun. I've missed a good time there. Hey, our kin is, we are looking for anybody who wants to come and play. There's been an exodus. People have left to play Skyrim. People have left to play Star Wars. And so if you've ever thought, I kind of want to do that Lord of the Ring things that Rafe's talking about, it's free to play. But you can come. I'll put this up on the blog if I remember. Hopefully when I sign off from here, I'll just go do it. I play on the server Land Roval, and my kin is called Explorers of Middle Earth, which we have a Guild Portal website too. If you go to Guild Portal and type in Explorers of Middle Earth, you'll find us, and you're welcome to come say hi to me in game if you are so inclined. And hey, I think that's all I've got down for you guys. I've got a big announcement, but I just hesitate to say it for a variety of reasons, so I'm not going to say it here, but it's big, and yeah, all right. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see when we let the cat out of the bag on my big announcement. All right, guys, it's been a pleasure as always. Looking forward to coming on episode 100 of the D6 Generation. And if you want to email me, you can email me at rafe@jimmydjango.com or hollywood@thed6generation.com. You can find me on my blog, jimmydjango.com. You can listen to my single, once a month, roughly airing podcast, The Hollywood GPS, on iTunes. And what else? Oh, and you can find me on Twitter on the D6G Hollywood. See you guys in 2.
And now we're going to take a little bit of a vacation from the vacation of our podcast to talk about vacations. It's time to talk about Geek Nation Tours, because we've got some really cool, very exciting news. We've kind of been encouraging you to just go ahead and get Terrace to let you on anyway. But we were just told yesterday, we got an email that a couple more rooms opened up for the Geek Nation Tour, Gen Con Tour, that we will be a part of.
Nice.
And we want to, we want to encourage you guys. Sign up for that. I mean, come from all over the world to meet us. It'll be great. And
go to the con too. That's a big thing.
Yeah, we'll go to exactly. We'll be there for dinner. You'll get to see the Play by Mob event. Which anybody could do. But, I mean, you will be there with a big block of people that you've gotten to know, and they'll be friends of yours, and it's really a cool opportunity. And, of course, you get to experience greater Indianapolis in all of its beautiful glory.
Right. Home of the 2011 Super Bowl, 2012 Super Bowl. And don't forget, we're going to, there's a little pre-planning session going to be on. Craig and I will be on a Skype call with all the people going on the tour and trying to give you tips. And you can ask us questions about what you should try to schedule for and what you want to do. So we're really excited about this. And if you were hoping to go on the Gen Con tour and we're kind of hemming and hawing and realized it was too late, now's your chance. Head on over to geeknationtours.com and click on the upcoming tours, and all the information is there. And just click on the Gen Con one and check out all the info, and then let Terrace know you want to be part of the deal.
If you did one of those things where you decided not to, and then the deadline came, and then you realized you'd made a mistake, well,
now's your chance.
Heaven has answered your prayers.
geeknationtours.com.
This is Total Fangirl. Regular Jane most days, total fangirl when the moment strikes. Han shot first. Starbuck is a guy. And Lestat, now there's a vampire. Hello, everybody. This is Nicole, your Total Fangirl. You can find me on Twitter at Nicole Wakeland and check out my blog, TotalFangirl.com. This week's shout-out, Chicken Caesar, a game of plots, politics, and poultry for 3 to 6 players. Honor of your ancient Roman chicken family. Pledge at Kickstarter.com. Well, what I'm going to talk to you about this week is actually something of an embarrassing moment. It totally wasn't my fault. See, what happens when you have kids is that you immediately have to start editing the way that you speak because you don't think you swear that much, or you try not to, or say off-color things. But you suddenly realize when you have children, those words sneak into your language more than you could possibly imagine. And really, you have to start editing them out the second that child is born, because you never know when you're going to say a word and your little toddler's going to latch onto it and then scream it at the top of their lungs gleefully as if they're saying lollipop all the way through the grocery store, and every other parent there looks at you like you are the worst parent on earth. Trust me, it's not something you want to experience. So I've tried to edit out most of the things that I say, and on occasion I slip because I'm human, especially when I'm driving a car and someone cuts me off. But I do pretty good. One of the places I have to be the most careful about saying just the right thing is when I'm at school, because there's a zero tolerance policy for inappropriate language in a grammar school. And I suppose it really ought to be that way. I mean, you don't want all your kids coming home swearing like they're sailors when they're 7 years old. So I'm pretty good. I did once slip and let out a slightly off-color word in first grade once when something went awry, and I got a look that you thought that I had just corrupted the entire classroom, even though I think only maybe 2 kids heard me. So I've been very careful ever since then. That's been 3 years, and I've managed not to say anything ever in the presence of little ears that could hear me. Well, the other day I was hanging around with a bunch of the moms waiting for the kids to get out of school, and what happened was we were talking about somebody, and this somebody was kind of a pain in the neck. And I think I even said pain in the neck or pain in the butt rather than something more colorful because, school, kids, you don't want to say anything. Well, as we're talking about this person, what popped into my head was something that some of you may be familiar with and some of you might not. It's Wheaton's Law. If you don't know Wheaton's Law, I'll explain it to you in a second. But the problem is that the small number of words that make up Wheaton's Law, and this would be Will Wheaton, one of them is a little bit off color. Not the kind of thing you want to say in front of the kiddos. It's the kind of thing that won't make adults even blink an eye, but that will make little boys and little girls giggle and say, hee hee hee, she said that. So as soon as I said Wheaton's Law in response to talking about this person who was not obeying it, I knew I was in trouble because I was talking to a group of moms that are not geeks. They don't know the first thing about Star Trek or Star Wars or who the heck Will Wheaton is or, gaming or anything. This whole podcast would be completely and utterly foreign to them. So I'm stuck trying to explain this, and I'm trying not to actually say it because I don't want to say that word in the school because I know it's not a word that you can say in a school. So I'm trying to give references and Will Wheaton, and he was on Star Trek, and he has this rule, and you're supposed to be really nice to people, and you shouldn't be a jerk to people, and just be kind and be nice, and that's kind of, his law kind of sort of is that. And of course, I'm thinking, please don't ask me. Please don't ask me to actually say what the law is. Please, please, please. So, of course, one of the moms does. I have no recourse. I've explained it as best I can, but they want to know what this Wheaton's Law is. So I say, don't be a dick. And the minute I say, don't be a dick, two little girls walk out of the bathroom in the hallway and hear me, start giggling, and go running up the stairs. And the heads in the foyer swivel and look at me like, I can't believe you said dick in front of all the little kids. And it so wasn't my fault. If just one other person in that room had had any kind of geek cred at all, I might have possibly known Will Wheaton's Law. Known that all it was don't be a dick, be nice, play fair, be cool to other people. I'd have been off the hook. Instead, because I'm a nerd and because that's the kind of stuff that pops into my head, I have now alienated yet another group of mothers at the school and risk getting thrown off of the PTO. So, much like Sheldon, I was thinking in my head, darn you, Will Wheaton, you're getting me in trouble. Wheaton!
And now we want to talk about our newest sponsor, GameSalute.com.
Is your favorite local store a select store?
If they're not, have them sign up today at GameStoreLocator.com to get access to select stores exclusives like Yomi, Alien Frontiers, and Fealty. So also check out, Island Fortress there?
Island Fortress, coming from FrostForge Games.
Yeah.
Pre-order today at shop.gamesalute.com or through your favorite select store.
Yeah, GameSalute does a great job of supporting your local store as well as supporting small publishers trying to get the stuff out through Kickstarter and things. And so if GameSalute's mentioning it, they know they've looked at the game already, they've vetted it, they know it's going to be a quality product. So check it on out.
Yeah, absolutely. GameSalute.com.
I'm Dan, your friendly professional game guide, and I'd like to welcome you to a new segment I'm calling When You Wish Upon a Game. When You Wish Upon a Game is about all the things you want to see happen in and around tabletop games. The things we set up as fantasy, as this'll never happen. Some are far-fetched, some are just around the corner, and most are closer than you think. Welcome to the place where your dreams can come true. To start off, let's imagine a world where the games you want are always in stock and set aside for you at your favorite store. When you find a series you like, you can easily subscribe. You could say, I'd like one of each of the Lord of the Rings card game expansions, please. Or, I'd like to know when the new D&D Next stuff comes out. Or, I'm really looking forward to checking out those Britannia land units coming out for Dystopian Wars. If you're a gamer, you could do this in person at the store, via email, by phone, through an app, or through your own personal page, accessible from anywhere. You could control your wish list, subscriptions, and reservations, and grant your favorite store access to those so that they could make sure you have those items set aside next time you swing by. You walk in and check out the games you've had your eye on, look at them in person, maybe try them out, and decide which you'd like to get. If you're a store owner, imagine that you could see, at a glance, the interest level of your customers in each new product before you order. You could know, for example, that 12 of your customers definitely want to pick up the new Descent 2nd Edition, that 8 of them are somewhat interested, and that 4 of them want to subscribe to the entire new series of Descent. If you're a publisher, you can improve your print run planning to avoid overestimating or underestimating demand, reduce your out of stocks, and improve your sales and profitability overall. As compared with the laughable information and inventory management systems the industry has in place now, this would be simply revolutionary and would drastically improve the customer experience. It would help the industry grow and thrive, rather than being stifled by the current method, wandering around with a blindfold on, randomly stabbing at new products and hoping you hit them exactly right. In short, it would be awesome. That's what I see when I wish upon a game. How about you? Email me at wish@gamesalute.com. Thanks for listening, and have fun playing.
Welcome back, and now we're very excited to talk about the brandy new hotness from Fantasy Flight Games, Rex. The end of an empire.
The final days of the empire.
Thank you, Dan. The final days of an empire. Let's get into the overview here of this baby. It is obviously published this year, 2012, by Fantasy Flight. Now, there's a lot of designer credits on this thing because the three of the designers are from the original Dune board game from Avlon Hill, who are also the same folks who designed Cosmic Encounter, correct, Dan?
That's correct.
Same crew. So.
Or as you put in there first, alien encounters or something.
Alien, yes, sorry, yes, right. Alien encounters sounds better. I like the sort of like alliteration.
Encounters?
It's sort of a little bit, even though it's an E. I know.
You could definitely see elements of Cosmic Encounter in this.
Yes, there are definitely elements in there. So Bill Herbal, Peter. What's the second? How do you pronounce Peter's name there? Dan, go for it.
Olotka. He's
Very
actually
good.
one of my Facebook friends.
Oh, there you go. And Jack Kitteridge.
Facebook friend.
See, that's awesome. He keeps in touch with these people. And then we have three folks from Fantasy Flight. Craig, who are they?
John Goodenough and Corey Kineska and Christian T. Peterson.
Right, so pretty much the A team there going in from Fantasy Flight.
Yeah.
I thought he was good enough.
Good enough. Or I'm sure he's never heard that joke before.
Yeah.
And this is basically a reskinning of the original Dune game. There actually are very, very little differences in terms of the core mechanics. We'll talk about that. I used to play Dune a lot when I was younger, and it's been like at least 25 years since I played it. But they came right flooding back to me as soon as I played the game. You can tell where it comes from. Its roots are there. The game length is supposed to be 2 to 3 hours. I'd say that's probably true. We played a 3-player game under 2 hours easily, and that was with everybody learning. How long did your 4-player game take?
It was about 2 hours and 15 minutes with the breaks that we took.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's pretty short, actually, with all new player or mostly new players. Yeah, so I'd say 3 hours is probably pretty reasonable as long as folks don't get into... I can see when you're doing your alliances, people getting long debates about when
We actually didn't run into that in 4
Yeah,
players.
but Dan did an awesome thing with his phone and kept us to 3 minutes of debate total. And I think we were all kind of, it's going to be our first game and it's going to be a complex game, so let's not spend too much time trying to just freeze about it.
Yeah.
Right.
So 20, 30 minutes per player, I think, is pretty fair. It's gonna, and the 30 minutes, I mean, we did 30 minutes a player with new players. So once could see, once you get 6 players that know this game cold, you could play that in 2.5 hours probably.
Oh, yeah, I think so, too. And so, as I mentioned, it's the retheming of the Avalon Hill Dune game, but now with a Twilight Imperium theme skinned all around it. And so, Craig, what is the sort of the pitch from the inside of the back of the box there?
From vaguest memory. So there's a galactic empire.
I have a little paragraph you can read right here.
Rex is a strategy board game for 3 to 6 players, set in the Twilight Imperium universe. During a game of Rex, each player takes the role of one of the great races attempting to control I hate that name, Mechatol City.
I know.
Mechatol City.
Kind of sounds like a laxative a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Or some
Are
other
you having
drug.
trouble with your digestion? Use Mechatol. Sponsored by Mechatol City.
Each race has a set of unique economic, military, strategic, and/or treacherous advantages that allow it to control certain aspects of the game, or even win the game with a unique victory condition.
That's pretty much it. And there is a few pages of fluff in the back of the book, which are a fun little read. But basically, it is Dune. But we'll get into the exact details of how it works in a minute here. But so let's talk about a little bit about what comes in the box. Craig, what does it sound like when you open a Dune rethemed Twilight Imperium box?
Something like that.
Arrakis, Dune. No, wait. Desert planet.
Yeah. Then it goes.
That's a good sandworm.
The
I like
spice must flow.
His name is a killing word. Okay, we can make lots of Dune references here, but they'd be wildly inappropriate.
What? What?
Ooh, nice. Look at you there, killing people with your voice. So in the box, first thing you're going to notice, well, actually, the very first thing you're going to notice is an errata card.
If you're Russ.
It's right in the top. There's a little white errata card that says, the following is incorrect in the book.
Kick in the pants.
Yeah, I'm glad they caught it, but at the same time, it's like, really? I just find those annoying. But then you're going to find the awesome rule book. I have to say, this rule book is fantastic. And this is the thing I'm going to mention several times that makes it a crying shame they couldn't get the Dune license for this. I know Fantasy Flight tried, and it's not their fault. But the artwork is so beautiful, and the TI theme is so pretty, and the races are so... And I keep thinking to myself, though, wouldn't this be awesome if it was Dune? That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
but it looks fantastic. The artwork's wonderful. The book's very well laid out. Two of my favorite things in there, a fantastic index in addition to full color. And on the back of the book, there is a quick reference sheet of all the phases of the game with page number references on it, which I love. What did you guys think of the rulebook, Dan?
I thought it was great, aside from the flagrant errors that they corrected. And you really have to read all of that because there are things that are just flat out wrong. It's not like, oh, here's a clarification. It's like, oh, we forgot to tell you that, for every unit you collect 2 influence as opposed to just a flat 2. But the presentation of the rulebook is great. It has a nice index. We use that quite a bit. And each page, when it's like, hey, go to page 8, that page has everything for it. There's not like multi-page. There's no rules that go over multiple pages. So there's no like flipping around to try and find it.
Yeah, it's very nice. And you're right, though, the run rule about gathering influence was a big error, unfortunately. But fortunately, they clarify very clearly. And the other thing to notice, the 6 faction cards are nice, and they go in front of you on the table. In the original Dune game, there are these cool little boxes that kind of folded up in these little things. But in this one, it's just little flat cards. Again, very, very nice artwork, and all the special rules for your faction are on those. And each faction also comes with 20 unit tokens and 5 leader tokens.
Very much a Fantasy Flight game.
There are lots and lots of tokens, except what makes this a little weird as a Fantasy Flight game is there's very little plastic in this game. In fact, the only plastic is the giant bombard fleet.
The Dreadnought fleet.
The Dreadnought fleet, which looks cool, and it's a very important token, and actually it works out well that it's so prominent because it really is a very important thing to watch out for in the game. But everything else, like there's no unit plastics or anything like that. Everything's cardboard.
I think it works really well, though, for the game.
It does. Actually, it looks great.
It's just like Small World. It has to work. It works the way it has to work because of the mechanics of the game. You couldn't have plastic models, I don't think.
Right, I think you're right. So there's a 20 unit tokens per faction, but then also each faction gets 5 leader tokens, which are these sort of cool looking oval shapes with the dovetail sort of notched out on one side. And that's important because they kind of these tokens can lock into the combat wheels. We'll talk more about that later. It's kind of an innovative way to handle that. Then there's the 2 battle boards, which are used in combat. More about those. They're kind of big dial things with little spots that lock in your leaders. And there's an absolutely huge game board. What do you guys think of the game board?
It's gorgeous looking.
I think it's beautiful, but I think we had I
have a replacement game board coming from Fantasy Flight.
Yeah, malfunction.
When I folded mine up, I folded it the wrong way, and rather than just like not folding, it's just snapped.
Oh, that's
like boom, like without a warning.
This actually reminds me of the game board. If you've seen the Android board, it very much reminds me of that with the different areas. So very gorgeously laid out. It really bright colors. It's got 6 basically sections that fold out, and it's a pretty meaty board, but it looks really nice. Most everything's clearly laid out on there. They have this weird clarification where they're like, "Oh, these spaces are 2 spaces away from each other," and you look and you're like, who would interpret that as not 2 spaces away?
Right. Some playtester obviously got confused, but I think it looks good. Craig, did you like the artwork and how it was laid out and everything?
I did. Yes, I did. It was good, and it looks like a city, and I like the little roads. There's a couple weird things where you could tell, like if they had moved the angle of a road, like you could tell it's supposed to be 2 different roads going from this section to the next section to the next section, but the angle that they did the road in, you could tell that somebody who wanted to could interpret that as like, well, no, it's kind of like one road there, and so
it just has a stop
couple
off.
Weird little things that I think if they had been a little more careful.
Some folks have said it looks a little bit like the Arkham Horror board because of those little circular areas that are joined by travel lanes, and that's in Android they work sort of that sort of theme going on there. It's funny because when I saw the preview pictures of the board, I was nervous about it. I wasn't sure I'd like it, but after seeing it in person and how big and how cool the artwork is in each area, I actually very much like the board. It was pretty
really
cool.
bright, too. It's nothing like the Arkham board, especially if you have the first printings of Arkham, where it's really dark and dingy. This is bright, gorgeous artwork.
You also get a couple decks of cards. You get the deck of influence cards, a deck of strategy cards. More about those later. You also get the ally advantage cards. Each faction's got 2 of those. You get some betrayal cards, which is a really, really slick optional rule. More about that later. You also get 6 quick reference cards, which are always handy. And, of course, because Corey Konecko is involved in this game, there are mini cards. We always blame Corey for the mini cards. There are 2 mini card decks. One of them is the strategy cards, and the other one is, which are, no, not strategy cards. One of them is the trader cards, and the other one are the bombard cards, which track how the fleet goes. Also, because it's a fantasy flight game, there are lots and lots of other tokens. We'll get into those later. There's also a very, very large and kind of cool-looking first-player token. And there is a giant cardboard piece that covers part of the board in lower player count games.
Did you got a first-player token in yours?
Yeah, the giant yellow thing.
Oh, because I just got like a coaster.
It is a coaster. You can rest your drink on it. It is the size of a coaster. And, of course, the centerpiece you're really going to be impressed by is the 5 model Dreadnought fleet, which are 5 spaceships that sit on little, as Dan mentioned, little sticks there that have a nice little base.
Lovingly assembled.
Lovingly assembled. It takes no time to put them together. They look fantastic. It is kind of, classic Ameritrash overproduction. You could have got away with a token here, but it does look pretty cool on the table.
No, you couldn't have. It'd be terrible. That would be awful. It would just look terrible from an aesthetic standpoint.
What do you think, Craig? Do you think the models were overkill or are they cool?
The models for the Dreadnought?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it seemed kind of gimmicky to me. Like it was like, and we're going to include models so we can include models kind of thing. I mean, it was neat, and I think it adds to the game because it is more of an ominous threat when you see those, that big block of models coming around. But it could have just as easily been, keep the aesthetic all across the board and done a really nice cardboard overlay that would have been just as cool, I think.
I think if they did a cardboard one, they would have needed to make it 3D because I think the reason it's so important that is flagrantly obvious on the board is that it is so detrimental to you if you say,
that's true.
Forget where it's moving after you look at your bombard card in advance and then let your soul units be destroyed in your first game.
Who would do that?
I may or may not have done that, sir. I may have got the wrong radio message.
Okay, I may or may not have done it on purpose. I was like, I'm gonna be a genius, and then because I had forgotten something else. So yeah.
Yeah. Did you play Soul also, Craig?
I did.
Yeah, you got to play the Freeman. I mean, the Soul.
Yeah.
So I like them. I do think it's a little overproduction, but it is so cool looking. It does look great on the table.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into setup. That's pretty much everything in the box. This game actually sets up pretty quickly. There is a little mini game sort of in the setup process, but it's actually fun. But basically, all you do is you plop down your massive game board, being careful to fold it the proper way and don't rip it in half. Next thing you can do is there's actually a special spot on the board to dump your influence tokens out. Most of us have them separated into plano or something, but there's actually a spot just for dumping your tokens there. Then you're going to shuffle and place the influence deck and strategy deck. Both have assigned spots on the board. That's quick and easy. Going to determine the first player using the bombard deck. So the bombard deck, which determines how far that cool plastic fleet moves every round, is just a bunch of cards with numbers 1 through 6, I think, on them. And so each player is going to grab one. The guy who gets the lowest number is going to go first. That's easy. Then in player order, this is sort of interesting, you pick your faction. So factions aren't technically random by the rules. Starting with player 1, each person is going to pick one of their factions. And when you get your faction card, you're also going to get your leader tokens, your unit tokens, and your ally advantage cards that match your faction. Okay, so that's pretty quick. Now it's time to determine traders, which is sort of a little mini game. So each faction has a card that matches one of their generals, right, Dan?
It's actually all 5, one for each of their leaders.
So how did the trader determining step work?
So you take all 5 of those for everybody that's playing, you shuffle them all together, you deal out 4 to each player, and then each of the players looks at it, and they keep one that is not their own. The only time you can keep your own is if you got dealt all your own guys.
Right.
You take one, you put it face down in front of you, or if you are the Barony of Letnev, you get to keep all 4. And then you just place it kind of face down. You can use it later in the game. All the rest of them get shuffled back in a trader deck. They go next to the board, and other cards may pull out of that deck in the future. So
the thing about the traders that are cool is that if you have the trader card for someone else's general and you meet that general in battle, which we'll talk about later exactly, you can then say, aha, I've got your trader card. You lose the battle automatically. So that's a very powerful thing. And what you want to be doing here at this step is looking at the trader cards you pull, even if you don't get to keep one for yourself. Because if you see some of your own guys in there, you kind of have good odds that nobody has them yet.
Yeah, if you get all 4 of your guys, there's only one other guy you're not seeing right now.
Right.
So that's good.
But if you don't get all 4 of your own, even if you see, let's say I've got to pick one of Dan's, but I see one of my guys in there, I kind of know that no one has him unless one of the special events occurs. So that's kind of a big deal. So there's a little bit of memorization going on there and kind of getting the hang of that. What did you think of the trader mechanic, Craig?
I liked it. You just explain. I mean, we didn't explain how it works yet.
No, we'll get the battles later. We'll save that for later. Let's talk about that later.
Okay, yeah. Well, basically, you need to see somebody needs to choose that leader in battle for that card to matter. So
Right.
the whole game, I was like, well, I mean, this is a really cool thing. And again, it goes right to Dune, which is to me. By the end of the evening, it was a weakness of the game that all of it was constantly reminding me of Dune.
Right.
But I was like, oh, we're not going to see this again. Except that at the very end of the game, there was a traitor was revealed, which blew away a whole battle and changed the course of the game. And then 2 traitors were revealed, like head to head, which was crazy. So everybody got wiped out in that whole part of the city. Nice. And then the very last move of the game, Luke had kind of been playing very, very with his cards very close to his vest, and I didn't know if he had 2 traitor cards because he ended up having one of those special events happen for him. And I didn't know for sure. He has a really good poker face, but I kind of thought he had one of my traitor cards.
Yeah.
And I had him in a position where I was going to win the combat and thus the whole game unless he had my traitor. And so I was looking at all my commanders, and I didn't have to put a commander now. Because you don't have to put a commander.
You have to have a commander.
You have to,
Yep.
Okay, so because that was a debate we were having last night. So yeah,
Someone's got to lead the troops.
It came down to if I chose the wrong commander and it was the one that he had, that would have been the game right there, and they would have won and we would have lost. So I think it's awesome because it's bizarre. In your head, you're like, oh, that's never going to come up, and it may not come up in a whole like you could play the game 3 games in a row, but we had it come up twice, hardcore in your teeth, and then the very last battle of the whole game, it was pivotal if there was going to be that card in there.
You definitely second guess yourself. Yeah, it's really interesting how you keep it on there. So the last couple things to set up, you got to figure out where the Dreadnought fleet's going to start, and this is really simple. 2 players grab battle dials. They secretly pick a number. The battle dials go from 1 to 20. You take the difference between the 2 numbers chosen, and that's the sector the fleet starts in. If you pick the sector that doesn't exist, i.e. sector 18 or higher or higher than 18, they just start in sector 1. So that's pretty simple. And then each player is also dealt 1 strategy card. And then on your starting card, it tells you how much your starting influence is, which is different for each faction, and where your units start, which is different for each faction. So basically, setup is really, really simple. You plop down the board, you shuffle a few decks, you do the little trader game, which is really just dealing out cards. Each person pick ones. You figure out where the fleet starts, and everybody gets a strategy card and their starting influence and units as described in their setup card. Pretty quick, actually. Next up is what are we doing to win the game? How do we win the game, Dan?
So you win the game by, as a single player, controlling 3 of the strongholds. There are 5 strongholds on the board. If you're playing with 3 or 4 players, you mark off one of those, so there's only 4 available strongholds. And you have to have 3 for yourself. If you go in an alliance with 2 players, you must, as a team, control 4. And if you're in an alliance with 3 players, which is the maximum you can have in an alliance, then you have to control all 5 in order to win. That's it.
Yeah, and it's that's the primary way you can win the game, but there are also faction secondary objectives, right?
Yeah, those are cheating.
So you got to watch for those. What I do like about
because that's how we won last night.
Exactly. No, this is very much like Cosmic Encounter. Like basically, they're like, here's the rules of the game. The game will break the rules. That is a core element. Which this is way back before. Like so many people think of that as like newer gamers think of that as like, oh yeah, that happens all the time in like Magic or something, where it's like the card trumps the rules. Cosmic Encounter was one of those first games that was like, nope, everybody's going to break the rules. And so in this, all your unique abilities on your character card break the rules, like Soul can deploy for free.
Right.
And then on top of that, you have 2 or 3 of the races that have alternate win conditions.
Right. Would you want to say something, Craig?
Yeah, wah.
Wah.
Dan's been complaining about about the Saul guys free deploying for over 24 hours.
Actually, that's tough though. I tell you, when I played them, it's not easy because you can't go anywhere. It's really kind of
exactly.
Right.
That's my
why
point. That's
I
why
was
I'm saying whack.
I was wise enough to ally myself with the Soul and went on their back.
So let's talk about how the game actually works and how those alliances work. One of the things that's cool about this game is alliances are very pivotal to the game, and they have game meanings, and they're you can win together, which is encouraged. So let's talk about the game turn. Quickly, the game is divided down into a bunch of phases. There's the influence phase, the bidding phase, the recruitment phase, the maneuver phase, the battle phase, the collection phase, and the bombardment phase, and then you repeat. There will be 8 turns to the game, and after the 8th turn, the game is over. And by the way, if no one has achieved the stronghold victory by the 8th turn, either the, I think it's the Hacan, or is it a Hacan? How do you pronounce those guys? What do you think?
I'd say Hacan.
Hacan, Hacan.
I call them lion guys.
The lion dudes, or the Kilrathi, as I would call them, the Hacan or Hacan, they will win automatically in the 8th turn only if Soul doesn't win, and Soul will win in the 8th turn if 2 objectives are either controlled by them or not controlled by anybody. So basically, if you let it go to 8, one of 2 factions will go in by the faction rules. So you got to, if you're not one of them, you got to stop it some other way by basically capturing strongholds. So in this turn, the first phase is the influence phase, which is pretty simple. The first player, i.e. the guy with the player 1 token coaster thing in front of him, is going to draw the top of the influence card, and it's going to do what it says. Usually, this is going to put influence into 2 spots on the board. So it'll have 2 pictures, it'll say 2 sectors, and it'll have amounts of influence, and you just grab some influence tokens and drop them into each of those spots. That's normally what happens. But there are other cards in there that can do things like the Soul Assault will come through, and they'll wipe out all the troops and influence that were in the last sector where influence came up. So in this game, the theme behind that is that Soul, the race, is basically trying to wipe out the city and take it over. And they've got these little squadrons of brute squads basically flying around, looking for insurrections, looking for people trying to cause trouble, and wiping them out. And so influence is you gaining weapon caches or informants or things and getting power. And so when they see influence come up, they, of course, come in and nuke it. Now, of course, the real mechanic for this is that it's based on spice and sandworms, and when spice comes up, you go to harvest a spice and you get hit by a sandworm. But it's the same idea, right? You stay one place too long, get eaten, basically is what happens in the game. So usually going to add usually going to add influence to 2 sectors. Sometimes the Saul Assault will come through and wipe that sector out. But also there's going to be temporary ceasefires in the deck. And when they come up, they're going to be alliances and negotiations, which we'll talk more about later. But basically, you just turn the card over, following the rules, and moving on in the influence phase. One thing to note, that it is in the rules that when you turn the influence phase card over, the player must announce which turn it is, and you can always see what turn it is in the game by the number of cards discarded. So if you're turning over the 3rd influence card, you got to say, we're in turn 3, and that's, of course, because in turn 8, the game ends, and everybody's supposed to know where you are in the game. Next phase up.
That's one weakness, I think. I thought there were several weaknesses to the graphic design. Mm-hmm. And I think one of them is trying to figure out. I think it's kind of weak sauce that you have to count discarded cards to see you can't really see at a glance what turn you're in.
Yeah, they had that big space on the board where you dump all your influence tokens. I could have done without that and put a turn counter there instead with a token
exactly.
on it.
There's a couple places where and there's not enough room for the influence tokens to be in that small little space in any kind of organized fashion.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
So like I said, I would call that a minor weakness. I think it's a major weakness that there's no way in a game where it's got a hard end and a lot depends upon what turn you're on. Yeah. The fact that you have to count discarded cards to figure out what turn you're in if you can't remember is, I think, weak.
That's fair. That's a. Yeah. So next up is the bidding phase. Now, everybody started with 1 strategy card in the game. As we're going to find out in combat, strategy cards are huge in this game, just as they were huge in Dune. So what happens is 1 strategy card is put face down for each eligible bidder in the game. Now note, I think we did this wrong when you and I played, Dan, on Sunday. It's not each player in the game, it's each eligible bidder. So if one player already is at their hand limit of 4 strategy cards, no strategy card is put down to bid for that person.
Now, is that a max of 3, or does it always scale up? Because I think we did that wrong both games.
It's always to the number of available bidders. So if there's 6 players bidding, there's 6 players bidding and they all have less than 4 in their hand, 6 cards will go face down. So even if in the middle of bidding, one player gets to their hand limit, you started with 6, you got to throw all 6 cards. But at the beginning, it's based on available bidders.
Yeah, we did that wrong.
So there would have been
more.
Yeah, there would have been more cards
Yeah.
dancing around in our.
So what happens is, that must have been a heck of a bidding war then.
Well, my ability, the Letnev, really benefit off having strategy cards. So if anything, that was to my detriment the most.
Yeah, right. So what happens basically is you put the strategy cards face down, and then starting with player number 1, and this is another thing we might have done wrong. The first bidding round is player number 1. He gets the first bid on the first strategy card. He bids some amount of influence. The next player gets to bid, and you keep going around until everybody passes, and the high bidder wins the card. Pretty simple bidding mechanic. Then you go to the next card, and now the player to the left of the first bidder in the last round starts the bidding. So the first bidder shuffles around the table as you move along those cards. So everybody should have a chance for bidding first.
Now, do you think that was there's like a weird token? Remember that token, Craig, that I was pointing out that we didn't know what it did? Is that supposed to be like a bid token, do you think?
Well, maybe.
To indicate like who it is? Because it'd be tough to keep track of like, oh, you bid.
But you were the only one that had that.
Yeah, I don't know. That's weird.
That is weird.
There's a token. Yeah, there's a token for the Letnev guys that nobody else had a corresponding token, and we didn't know what the token did.
And there's no corresponding like special ability or anything that we could see. So
weird.
Right.
That might have been like a bidding token. If it's not, they should have something like that in the game. But yeah, we played that wrong. We didn't play that.
So anyway, that's the only way you can get more strategy cards. And as I said, these are very powerful as you see to combat. So this is a big part of the game. And one of the factions gets the money from these bidding, which is kind of a big deal for them too. So that's the bidding phase. So again, the first phase, you turn over an influence card, you do what it says.
What's this in bold? Starting bidder shift. Does that mean within the bidding?
That means yeah, within the bidding phase, right? So if there's 6 players, six cards are out, right? So when you bid on the first card, player 1 is the first bidder. When you bid on the second card, player 2 is the first bidder. When you bid on the third card, player 3 is the first bidder. So by the time you get to the last card, the 6th player should be the first bidder on the 6th card, right? So that's huge. Yeah. That's a huge, and it's very clear in the rules. We just blew it off because we thought it was simple, but it's right there.
Yeah, we just went over it, but so that's a learning game. That's
well, that's why I'm trying to point them out here for our listeners so you can catch them. So those are the first 2 phases. These are actually pretty quick phases, right? We did an influence card. We put some cards up for bid. You do the bidding. That's done. Moving on, and the bidding doesn't go forever because you don't know what you're bidding on, really. You're just bidding on a card. It's not like you're reading the card and analyzing it.
One guy does.
One player does have the ability to look at the cards in advance. One of the factions. That'll slow you down a little bit.
A little bit of a time sink.
Yeah, it depends on who it is. And again, once you become experienced with the game, you're going to learn them and glance them and know what they are.
Yeah.
Because the strategy cards are, like, on your reference card, you know every battle strategy card that exists. And then the other ones are like, oh, okay, that's pretty obvious. So once you've played through, I think this game is definitely, you're going to hear this over and over again. Once you've played it through once, you're going to know how it works. But you have to play through that game once. And
it's not that complicated a game, really. It's just there's a lot of little things to keep track of. Next up is the recruitment phase. Now, this phase only matters to you if you've got dead guys. So what happens is, in the start of the game, some of your guys are going to start in the city, and some of your guys are going to be in what's called reserve, which is just everything else you own next to your little board. As guys are killed, for whatever reason, they move to, there's a little section of the board that are for all the different colored players where all your dead guys go. In the original Dune, these are the tanks, which made a lot of sense because they're the tanks. But in this game, they're just the dead zones. So you throw your guys in there. If you have anybody in those zones during the recruitment phase, starting in player order, you can buy them back into your reserve at a cost of 2 influence per guy, up to a maximum of 5. But then also each faction has a little note on their player card that says you get X number of guys for free each recruitment phase. So there's going to be a lot of battling in this game. You're going to have a lot of dead guys you're going to be bringing back all the time. It doesn't matter how they die. If they die from the bombards, if they die from a battle, if they die from a soul attack or whatever, they all go into the little dead areas and you can bring them back. Now, in addition to your guys being brought back, you can also bring back leader cards. You can only ever get 1 leader card back per recruitment phase, and you pay the cost of the leader card. So as you mentioned on these leader little tokens here, there's a number, and that's the value of the leader. So that the higher the number, the better they are, but also the more cost to bring them back into your reserves. So losing a high level like the Soul have a level 7 leader, losing him is a very expensive proposition to get him back into your hand.
Yeah.
So that's the recruitment phase. Again, that's very simple. And the meat of the game is actually in the maneuver phase, which again is actually pretty short. How does the maneuver phase work, Craig?
You're going to be able to move some or all of one group of your units from one space into another space, and they move. The standard distance is 2, and the Sol, is it the Federation of Sol or the whatever the guys from Sol or Sol, they can move 3, and if you control a spaceport it doesn't have. They don't have to be leaving from the spaceport. Anywhere on the board, your guys can move 4.
Right.
But it's one group of your stacked tokens, and it doesn't have to be the whole stack, but one group, and they're moving on their own from one point, 1, 2, or 3 or 4 spaces away. Yeah, it's very simple. It doesn't take very long at all.
And you just follow the little connectors from zone to zone to see which ways you can move. What's interesting about this game is you can move through zones with enemy units in them. It's sort of interesting, right? You can skip right by people. So there's no choke points or anything. You just hop by them, get where you're going. The biggest thing to watch out for is you can't move through the bombardment. So again, to Dan's point, these big plastic ships on the board, wherever they're sitting, you can't go there. You can't voluntarily walk in there because you'd be destroyed.
Yeah. And then you can deploy, which is you pay unless you're Sol. You pay to drop units almost anywhere on the board, again, unless you're Sol. And again, you can only drop into one space. So you can't scatter your guys all over the board or make a big power play for multiple places at the same time. The most you can do is move a stack into one place and drop a stack into another place. So the most you can do is kind of make a 2-prong attack.
Right. And it costs you influence to drop them on the board unless you're Sol. So it costs you 1 influence per unit to get them on the board. If you're deploying them into a spot where there's enemy units, it actually costs you 2 influence per unit.
Yeah.
So it's more expensive to direct. And the sequence here is forced to be move first, then deploy. You can't deploy, then move. Which actually I think is a reverse from how Dune used to work. So you move, and then you deploy. And that's it. And that's the whole movement phase. So you go around in player order. Each player does 1 move. They do 1 deploy if they want to. You go around the board. You're done. And because there's only 1 move and 1 deploy, it's not like Risk or anything where you're really trying to think about what all my attacks I'm going to do. There's only 1 move you can do. So it's pretty quick. Dan, what did you think of the mover phase? Did you find it was a lot of analysis paralysis?
A little bit, but not really. I had a little timer I was doing for the other ones, and basically I would just hit 2 minutes whenever, and we would frequently go through 3 or 4 or 5 phases before the timer actually went off. I would forget it was running. Even maneuver, which you would think would be one of the longest phases, was usually a minute for 4 players. So.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, I think it's pretty quick, and I like that it's a very limited choice. But it feels like you get a lot of power, and you can project a lot of power everywhere because you can move your guys, and then also you can being able to move 4 is getting a spaceport is huge. Mm-hmm. You can get quite a ways across the board.
And there are only 2 of those that I saw on the board, so those are really key to maintain.
Right. Next up is the battle phase. So after all movement and deploying is done, you look around the board. Every space where there's 2 or more players, there's going to be a battle. And in player order, which starts with the guy with the token moving around, you're going to resolve these battles. Battles are always 1-on-1, and you work through them. We'll get to the battles in a second. I just want to go through the whole turn phase. So you fight your fights. After your fights are done, it is the collection phase. Collection phase is really simple, but here's where one of the biggest misprints of the game are. So remember up in the influence phase, we said the influence cards, most of them will drop some influence in 2 sectors on the board, right? So in this phase, you get to collect influence from the board in any spaces you've got units. And remember, the battles have already occurred, so there's not going to be any spaces on the board with 2 different colors. Now there's just every player's got their own space. If you own a space and there's influence in there, you can collect from it at 2 influence per unit in the space. If there's 10 influence in the space, you've got 3 units there. You can collect 6 of that 10 influence off the board and put it in your pile, right?
I think Craig had some experience with that.
Yes, I did. I thought I got all. That's what the bombardment zone was coming towards me, and I could look at it, so I knew it was going to come over me. But you collect your influence before then, so I was all clever, and I moved my giant stack of units out of that area, but I left one behind to collect my influence, and then in the collection phase, I was like, and I take,
just 2.
Just 2 of that enormous stack.
And this is a great spot that really shows you how well the rules capture the theme from the original game they were written for, because the Bombard fleet in the original Dune was actually a storm coming. So the fluff there is, oh no, we got to collect the spice, but there's a storm coming, what do we do? And the other thing that is, of course, is when the other problem you have is if you leave a lot of guys there, even if the Bomber fleet's not going to get you, right? The next influence phase could be a Sol attack, which says every unit that's in the square where the influence last was dies.
Yeah.
Which basically in the original Doom was a sandworm. So as you're harvesting this stuff, you're worried about, are you going to get attacked by a sandworm? Are you going to hit by a storm? Same in this game. It's just you're worrying about a Bombard fleet or Sol discovering that you're getting a lot of stuff.
It just doesn't have the same level.
It doesn't. It doesn't. You really, that's
and even the funniest part about that is that the Sol ability is basically you're immune to Sol assaults.
Yeah.
And also, whenever there's a Sol assault at your space, you can move to any other space on the board. It's like, what?
With no fluff justification.
Well, I think, the only thing I can think of, and of course, because Sol is really the freeman who could, or the fremen, who can ride the worms, right? So when the worm attack comes.
Right. Oh, that's exactly.
Right.
In Dune, that was the justification.
Well, the only thing I can think of is if the Sol attack is really a bunch of little Sol flyers attacking you, then, and if you're Sol, maybe they can pick you up and fly you somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, but it's just like you can see that they built that mechanic for Dune.
You can see they were trying to think, what can we use besides sandworms? Which, and again, I mean, full props to Fantasy Flight. It works fine. It's just, you so want this to be Dune, really. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But still, the collection phase is really simple. You collect, and then also everybody gets 2 influence just for playing. It's called fleet support. So everybody gets 2 for that as well. That's the collection phase, a real quick phase. And then finally, there's a bombardment phase. This is the phase where the fleet moves, the dreadnoughts fly along, and people die. So how this basically works is you flip over the top card on the bombardment deck, and it's going to have a number on it, as I mentioned, 1 through, I think 6 is the highest number.
1 through 6, yep.
And whatever number you get, the fleet is going to move that many sectors ahead. And as it moves a sector, anything it passes over, whether it's influence or units, are destroyed. Unless they're in a spot that has a little shield icon on it, means it's shielded from bombardment. So as this thing flies along, if it moves 3 sectors, if you're in any of those 3 sectors, you're going to die as they pass over them. And then wherever it stops, you can't move into or out of. Now, if it happens to stop on top of a spot that's shielded, good news, you're not destroyed. But bad news is because you're under a direct bombardment, you can't enter or leave the square, so you're just stuck trapped there inside your shield until the fleet moves on. Right. So that's kind of cool. And the other thing to remember, here's another note that you might miss in the rules. After you turn over the fleet bombardment card, you're supposed to shuffle it back into the fleet bombardment deck. So there's always a chance the same number can come more than once in successive turns. So basically, it's like a die roll, except it's not a die because one of the faction's ability, the soul, is to look at the top of the bombardment phase after this thing's been the bombardment deck after it's been shuffled, because they're part of the faction that's bombing the planet. They can get radio frequency and know how far it's going to move next turn. So they're not immune to it. They just got to get the heck out of the way before it happens, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, and the last thing you do in the bombardment phase is you pass the first player token to the person on the left, and there's a new first player. And that's pretty much the whole game. But there's a couple of cool little areas of interest is the combat system. So Dan, how do we prep for combat?
Okay, so you give each player a battle dial, which has a little wheel on it. It's basically like a little kind of rectangular card. Has a wheel on it that goes 0 through 20. I believe the 20 is the highest. Mm-hmm. And then on the right-hand side, there are 4 slots that match up with those leader dovetails, so you can kind of snap your leader into those slots. Those slots are, I'm not playing any cards, I'm playing an attack card, I'm playing a defense card, or I'm playing an attack and a defense card. So secretly, each player will choose the number of units they're going to commit, which cannot be any higher than the number of units they have on the board. Mm-hmm. And they're also going to pick a leader from their leaders, which are all face down, so it's all secret. And they're going to put it into whatever they're going to play for their cards. So you're kind of looking at your leaders, you're looking at your strategy cards, you're looking at your units on the board, you're saying, okay, what am I going to do? All this stuff is just to add up to a number. And you want that number to be higher than your opponent's. So if I have 12 units on the board, I might say, I'm going to commit 6 units. So I turn my dial to 6. I'm not saying that out loud, but internally I'm saying, okay. And then
I wish you would. That'd make it much easier.
And then I'm going to say, maybe if you're the guild, you could telepath me or something. So I'm going to take a leader. Let's say that my leader has a 3 power, right? I'm like, that seems good. I think I can beat this guy with a 3. So I put the guy in there. I look at my strategy cards. I say, I have an attack card I want to play. I don't want to play any defense cards, or I don't have any. I put my leader. I snap it into a little spot that says attack. This is all secret at the same time as the other player is doing it. Once we're ready, we both say, okay, reveal. We flip it over. We say, okay, we've got these totals, right? Now, first off, you can reveal traitors. And you can say, do you know what the leader is now? Is he a traitor? Do you have that card? And if you have the traitor, the other side instantly loses the battle. Instantly.
Yep.
And they remove the traitor from the game. This is important because normally if leaders are defeated, mm-hmm. they go to the dead zone or warp or whatever you want to call it, and you can get them back. If a leader is a traitor, they're removed from the game forever. You can
no
never
one wants that
back.
Dirty scoundrel back.
No.
I thought they only died if you used a special weapon.
They do, unless to the traitor. That's
what I mean. Even if you lose, you don't lose the use of your leader unless they used a special attack.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
So if you lose, so you can reveal a traitor. If you do, then basically the strategy cards don't matter because
nothing else. Even
lost.
The points don't matter. If a traitor card comes up, the whole battle just stops, and the guy with the traitor on the side loses, and his traitor's removed from the game.
And this came up when I was. I had the only chance. Remember this, Craig? I had the only chance I had to beat. I had like 2 guys on the board, and Dave had like 8. And I was like, I have nothing I can do to beat this. But I was the Letnav, so I had a bunch of trader cards.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, I have 2 of Dave's trader cards. I hope he picks the right trader. So I put my thing to 0 because I couldn't lose any guys. And it didn't even matter. With 0 troop strength and like a 2 leader, I reveal it. I go, oh, I have a trader. You lose. And he didn't have a trader, so the combat's done. Doesn't matter what his attack cards are. Doesn't matter any of that.
Right.
So assuming you don't have a trader, because that's a fairly rare occurrence, then you go to resolving your strategy cards. Now, at this point, you've only said on your battle dial what types of cards you're going to play. You haven't said what the cards are. So, but you've committed to it. So if you said you're going to play an attack card, you have to have an attack card, and you have to play one. So now you're going to look at your hand, you're going to go, okay, we're each going to choose whatever cards we said we were going to play them face down, flip them over, and reveal them. And then there are weapons that kill leaders. There are defenses against weapons. There's basically 2 weapons. There's an energy rifle and there's a biological weapon. And there's a defense against either of those. And then there are other random cards like mercenaries, +3 unit strength, that sort of thing. So you reveal those. You total up your numbers. Whoever has the highest wins. The loser loses all of their units. The winner loses the number of units that they committed.
Right.
So you would think that like, oh, I have 12 guys. Awesome. So my strength is going to be 12 plus whatever my leader is plus my cards. Nope. Well, you could do that. And then you would have no guys left even if you won.
Right.
Because you'd have to commit all your guys. So usually you're trying to leave at least one guy and you're trying to kind of measure what you need to put in.
Right.
Because if you think you can kill your opponent's leader and you see they only have 4, you might be able to put fewer units. So there's a lot of kind of thinking about that stuff.
Right. If you have an energy rifle and you kill the leader, then his value, that happens before you total up your value. So if he's got a 5 leader in there and he's committed 5 troops, he's at 10. But if I can kill him with an energy rifle, the leader's out, now he's down to a 5. So that's a huge difference, especially since most leaders are between 3 and 6 or 7, depending on the faction. Now, the other thing that happens is sort of interesting here is the loser also loses all the strategy cards he played. But the winner can keep all of his strategy cards or discard them. It's his or her choice.
See, we didn't do that either.
Now, this is the only way you can hand manage. You may not voluntarily ever discard a strategy card.
I was wondering.
You either lose them from combat or you can voluntarily discard them as a leader, but otherwise you keep them. Okay? Yeah. And that's a big deal because when you get to hands has a 4, you can't buy any more.
Yes, which happened to me.
So unless you fight, you can't color your hand and get it exactly what you want.
Yeah. So you could say, I have a crappy defense card, I have a crappy attack card, I'm just going to play these. I don't really want them in my hand because I want to draw more cards. I'm going to play them. I don't really care if they even do anything. I'm going to choose as the winner to discard them. If you're the loser, you automatically discard them. If you're the winner, you could say, well, I like this energy rifle. I'm going to keep that energy rifle. That was something that Craig and I
one of the things I liked about it was I had 2 defense shields, right? So you don't need to because you're trying to build the optimum 4-card hand for having. And if you win, you don't lose them. So because I won a battle with my energy shield, I discarded that one because I had a spare. So now I'm getting my hand to exactly what I want. As long as I always win battles, I'm going to eventually have the ideal hand that I'll never lose.
It also makes the Letnev amazing because they have a hand size limit of 8.
Right. The Letnev are amazing. So that's combat. Combat, what's really interesting about this, there's no luck. It's all about thinking about your opponent and what do you think they're going to commit and looking at the table and trying to get away with the least amount of troops dying because whatever you commit is going to die, even if you win. So you got to work that out.
Well, there's just enough luck that there's a little bit of insecurity because of the trader cards. That's the only
That's true,
luck.
Yes. What do you think of the combat system?
And again, which is where my brain kept going, it seems to me, with my limited knowledge of math, like vanishingly rare that you're going to line up. You're going to happen to have the one card of the commander that the one guy you're fighting happens to use, but boy, when it happens, it's really, really cool.
That's a stand-up moment. That's like a stand-up die roll, but a stand-up card flip.
Yeah. I like the drama. Craig, did you like the combat system overall?
I did, yes.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. I think the big thing you're worried about is, did someone get my 5 or 6 leader? That's what you're scared of, right?
Yes.
Because basically, I had Dan's 3 leader. He's never going to play his 3 leader, right? So I'm not worried about. Now, the other thing about playing leaders, I don't know if everybody knows this rule. It's on the back of the book as a rule not to forget. The same leader cannot participate in 2 different battles in the same turn. So that is a big deal.
That never came up.
So that's just to keep an eye on that.
Sense.
So if you're fighting several battles at once, you can't use your highest leader in all 3 battles even if you win.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that was part of my reason for allying with Sol is I had this insurance that if they backstab me, I had 2 of his high-level leaders.
And there's some nasty stuff because there's some cards in the game that let you
Coincidentally, I had your highest level leader.
Nice.
Yeah, but I had no unit, so it didn't matter.
That's true.
There are some cards that I think Sarah had a card that let her look at someone else's trader card. So there are some neat things. And then, of course, you can do alliances and say, well, I'll tell you who his trader is if you ally with me.
That's actually really cool. I want to bring that up, is that alliances in all discussion in this game are very specifically, you may not secretly, this isn't diplomacy where you can be like, hey, France, come talk to me over here. Right. You must do it openly and talk about it over the table.
Yep.
So you have to say, you could say, hey, Russ, I peeked at Craig's card. He's got this guy for the trader. But you can't show them any of that.
You could be lying.
So you could just lie. You could just be like, oh, no, that's it.
Right. Wait, the guy that invented Battlestar Galactica did this too.
So
was involved and
now,
designed, not invented.
Well, let's talk about alliances. So the next thing that can happen, the alliances are another big part of this game. And you're right, Dan, there's a lot of framework around these alliances, and they're very strictly controlled. So basically, remember that influence step, the first part of each turn you flip a card over? One of the cards is temporary ceasefire. Now, when this comes up, the game sort of pauses, and it's the only time in the game that players are allowed to actually trade influence. So I can say, hey, Dan, I'll give you 5 influence if you ally with me. But also, you can negotiate and announce alliances. So if I say to Dan, hey, I'll give you 5 influence if you ally with me, and Dan says, sure, what happens is we can then trade ally advantage cards. Each player has 2 ally advantage cards, and it basically says, if I'm playing Soul, I would give Dan my Soul card, and it would say, Soul Alliance advantage. You now can avoid the Soul attack when they, the Soul attack thing that happens.
And you can ride the worm.
And you can ride the worm, right? Get teleported around. Meanwhile, Dan would give me his advantage card, which is whatever it is. I think one of them is the Lazak is I get to share the money you get from.
Yeah, that was played to a very advantageous use by Jolnar, and
he just give you one every time or something. So you work that out. What's cool about that, and what's interesting about this is you can only be in one alliance at a time, but an alliance can be up to 3 players. So half the players in the game could be on one team, basically.
And that's at 5 or 6 players.
Right.
In a 4-player game, you can only have 2 on alliances. Right. In a 3-player game, no alliances.
Right. And that's why I think a lot of people talk about Dune in this game as well as being best with 6. Because the more players, the more the alliances get interesting. The other thing about alliances is, if you have an alliance, so you get the benefits of the ally card, which is the big reason to do the alliance. Plus, you can cooperatively win, which is a core rule, which is nice. But if you're in an alliance, you cannot move into a sector where there's ally forces. You can never. So if Dan's a red and I'm blue, I can never be in his sector, even though we're an ally.
And you can move through their sectors just like enemies, but you can't land there, basically.
Right. And the other thing is, you can't voluntarily break an alliance. You can only break an alliance when the ceasefire card comes up. So when the ceasefire card comes up and Dan and I say, yeah, we'll be in an alliance, until we see another ceasefire card, we cannot break our alliance. So you got to enter these things, you got to enter into these things with some caution. What do you think about the alliance stuff, Craig?
What did I think about the alliance? I think it's neat. I think it's huge because it changes the victor. It's not like for instance in Eclipse where you're like, oh, we're allies, so we help each other, but we're still trying to win. Mm-hmm. This game, your alliance actually changes the victory conditions of the game. It changes the dynamics of the game. All of it goes from every man for himself, but we can help each other, to actually a team game. Mm-hmm. Which then has some cool other stuff like the advanced cards, the traitor card. What are they called? The betrayal cards,
which optional rule.
Yeah. So I liked it, but at the same time, I could see where if I was playing in a group, like I allied with Dan, who I know, and I was like, oh, this will be cool. But like Dave and Luke had never played before with each other, and they allied, but then you could tell that they weren't understanding each other. Mm-hmm. And like I think Luke grokked the concept of getting the influence passed to him during the bidding faster than Dave did. So he was like, oh, give me whatever you can. And Dave's like, okay, I'm going to give you 4. And then he wouldn't use it to bid because he was planning on using it to deploy.
Right.
But he wasn't telling Dave that. And Dave was like, that's bull crap. I just gave you stuff and you didn't. So he was like, so that I think that like any kind of diplomacy or any kind of, ally backstabby kind of thing, it's got that element of this game is very much dependent upon the group that you're playing.
Yeah, this is definitely a backstabby game because it can be, especially if you use the optional rules for betrayal. Because in the core game, you can't break an alliance except during a ceasefire. So near the end of the game, I could, if a ceasefire came up, I could say, "Oh, sorry, Craig, we're near the end. I'm going to break out now because I think I can win by myself." And you'd be like, "What? I've been working together the whole game, going to share that soul victory. Now it's going to be turn 8, and you're going to dump on me? What the?" So you can see that happening, right?
Yeah.
And then the betrayal cards are even nastier because the betrayal cards are held to the very, very end of the game, and then after you win, you think you win, but then you can play a betrayal card and say, yes. Well, here's what works. So at the end of the game, either all the people in the alliance who won shake hands and say, good game, and it's actually in the rules, you must shake hands, or if someone doesn't shake their hand, they put their betrayal card down, and if the requirements are satisfied betrayal card, they win instead.
Yeah, the betrayal cards are alternative win conditions.
So they are
basically
evil, though, because they're basically saying you think you won with me, but aha, you didn't. So that's just totally
and
cool.
I love the rule that's like, because you can imagine if there are 3 people on a team and like 2 people shake hands, and so the other guy's like, I'm going to betray you. They can actually go back. The other people can be like, oh, well, actually, if you're going to do that, I'm going to betray you.
Right, and then they have and then there's a sequence of power betrayal in the betrayal cards.
Yeah, it's like
that's an optional rule, but definitely, so you definitely want to learn the game cold first before you get to that realm. Now, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the different. That's the whole game. That's it.
Right. Yep.
But we need to talk a little bit quickly about the different factions and how they work, because as Dan mentioned, Cosmic Encounter, the whole game is around how different the factions are. This game is no different. The fact that the factions are so different is what makes it really interesting, I think. So quickly, let's talk about a couple. Soul is the one that I call it Soul because I think it's based on the Soul system, but I could be wrong. And Craig,
I think that's right.
Craig, you played them
they're
also.
humans.
Yeah. The big thing with Soul is they get to peek at the fleet card, so they know where the bombard's going to go. The Soul Offensive won't kill them, so that's great too. They win in turn 8 if there's 2 sectors that are specifically free or controlled by them, so they're good for letting the game run long. And they don't pay for deployment, but they can only deploy to certain sectors. So they're really only going to be in about a quarter of the board, and then they got to walk their way to
It's actually about a third of the board. It's the third of the board that was ripped off in my copy.
Right.
There you go.
It is,
Okay.
it is a very limited area.
So I felt in the beginning I was like, "This is awesome, I'm free," but then later I was like, "Whoa, this is
right.
This is
But
tough to get there."
But a key thing is that in the 3 and 4 player games, you don't need to win, and that in turn 8 you don't need to hold 2 positions. You only need to hold 1.
You only need the Imperial Palace, not Mechatopia.
That's a lot easier. And that's in one of the zones.
Huge.
And that's in one of the zones you can dump into, so it's pretty easy to defend that, yeah.
And so I think that's kind of huge. And I mean, I could have, had I thought about it and wanted to, which I didn't because Dan's such a great guy. But the last time we had a ceasefire come up towards the end, and I could have been like, oh wait, I've got all these stacks within easy transportation back to the palace, which would then be almost impossible because I had, in the end of the game, I had 19 of my 20 troop tokens on the palace.
Wow. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, and I had like a really good array of attack and defense cards and all of my generals at my disposal.
Well done,
That's
sir.
why it turned out that it was going to be all about the trader.
Yep.
So if somebody had, like Dan, as it turned out, had my trader, so
I
he
had
could
2
have
of them.
jumped over there with one guy and been like,
Right.
"Oh, by the way, boom, you die. Oh, 19 guys, I don't care." So, so I didn't do that, and it turns out that it's a good thing that I didn't. But,
Right.
but yeah, so I think that win condition is. I'm not sure if that win condition is. It seemed like it was kind of a no-brainer to me.
Right. Well, and Soul, by the way, is obviously based on the Fremen from the original Dune game because they are immune to the worms and the storms.
Yeah.
Now, Dan, you played the Lazax, both games, or just the one we played in?
No, I played the Lazax in the first game and Letnev in the second game. So
Now, I was calling them Harkonnen in our game, but they actually are the Empire, I would think.
Emperor Shaddad.
How did they work?
So they receive influence. First off, they only get 1 guy back a turn, but they have mechanized units, and their mechanized units are worth 2 of another unit. So basically they have their regular 15 units, everybody has 20, but 5 of theirs are like super units. They deploy for the same cost effectively, but they're worth 2. You only get 1 back a turn, and that's a big part of their benefit. But then here's the huge part. They get all the influence from the entire bidding phase, except for anything they bid.
Right.
So if they bid 5, they don't get to keep it. They pay it to the bank. But if the Soul and the Jolnar are in a bidding war and they bid it up to 6, and Jolnar wins, hey, Lazax gets that 6.
It just gets the monies.
And the idea there is that the flavor is that they control this entire giant city, which is like 4,000 miles square. Right. And so they kind of have the ability to get all these funds from all these places, even though there are other factions using them.
Well, they are the Empire in decline. If you read the fluff, there, they're kind of the guys falling apart. Then, speaking of the Jolnar, they're based on the Guild, obviously from the thing. You can tell their big deal is they can look at the card being bid on before bidding occurs. Sarah played these guys, I believe.
Yes.
So when you're bidding and you go start with the first card, they don't get to look at all the bidding cards at once. They just look at them one at a time. So they don't know what's coming up in the bidding, but they do know the current one being bid on and if they really want to fight for it or not. Also, I'd imagine if you had an ally, you could probably say things to them, which would be interesting.
This is also the faction that you would not want to let somebody who has any sort of AP inclinations play. If they have any sort of analysis paralysis, no, you cannot play Jolnar.
Right. Yeah, right. And during movement, though, they also get to peek. During the movement phase, they get to peek at the top card of the influence deck. This is a big deal because it means they have a good chance of knowing where the influence is going to pop up next turn. So they can get their forces there in advance and be ready for the money. And, of course, they can see one element or during battle. They get to make their opponent reveal one of their major elements on their combat board before they lock their combat board in. So they can say, show me your leader, show me the number you chose, or show me the strategy card option. Actually, they can say, show me the strategy card you're going to use, and that forces you to pick your strategy card earlier than you might otherwise do.
Well, it's and specifically, it's show me your attack card or show me your defense card.
Right,
so they don't know if you're going to play both, but they know which one you're going to play if one of them.
Yep.
And their ally can use that power.
Right, which is nice. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Now, next up is the Letnev, who are based on the Harkonnens. How do they work, Craig?
They're 100% Harkonnen. They get to keep all 4 of their trader cards.
Which is huge. Normally you get one trader. You get 4 times.
They get 2 strategy cards to start, and then 2 strategy cards every time they win a bid for a strategy card, and their strategy card hand limit is 8. So they've got the nukes, and they've got the heavy weapons, and they've got all these other cool things. And yeah, I mean, and the fact that they've got 4 trader cards and everybody else only has 1 is huge for that whole Harkonnen theme, because they were, of course, the masters of the traders of all the other houses and everything.
They look kind of like vampire counts in this one.
Yeah,
kind of.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
So Dan, I keep on calling them the Hacian for some reason where they're spelled. It's Hcan, Hacan,
Hakan,
or Hakan. So Dan, how do they work? You want to call them the
Hakakan?
They're based on Atreides, but or
Hakakan.
I can't tell you. So if they win in turn 8, if Sol doesn't win, they're the lion people. Okay, for those of you following along at home,
Kilrathi.
They receive influence from deploying units. Now, these are the 2 factions I have not seen played because I haven't played a 5 or 6 player game yet.
Right.
They receive influence from deploying units. Is that when they deploy a unit?
No. That means when you. It's kind of like
it's the alternative.
So when you deploy units and you pay, so you remember it costs you one to deploy a guy, and there's 2 to deploy a guy to an enemy zone. So if you deploy 5 guys and play 5 influence, that goes to the Hakan.
That's awesome. I call dibs on that next time I play.
Yeah, right.
They have they deploy at half cost, so basically they have like good transportation and they're getting around. They actually allude to that in the fluff. They're like, oh, there's the shuttle, and like we didn't realize it was the Hakan.
Yeah, they actually in the fluff it says that the Sol seems to be using the Hakan shuttles.
Yeah, and then they can teleport their units anywhere for a cost of 1 influence per unit. And is that unlimited?
That's huge. So basically what that means is when they deploy their guys, they pay. So they deploy 4 guys, they only pay 2 instead of 4. But also they can teleport, meaning that they can take a unit from one side of the board and place it anywhere else on the board for 1 point per guy. 1 influence per guy. That's huge, because if you've already got all, because what happens in this game is, let's say you don't fight people for some reason. Once all your 20 guys are on the board, you can't take them back to your reserves. So when you deploy, you can put them anywhere on your board. But once you're on the table, you got to walk wherever you want to go. But the Hakan can teleport their guys around at a cost of 1 per guy, which is a pretty big deal. And last but not least are the XX. I was going to say these are the guys that have the Roman numerals in their name because it's the
XX.
It's XXCHA.
It's the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, let's be honest.
And they're definitely space turtles, and I have to say the artwork actually makes them look pretty cool. I would totally play these guys in an RPG. They look pretty cool. These are based on the Bene Gesserits from the original game. They use these guys are some of the wackiest rules, but so did the guys in Dune. They, first of all, their alternate win condition is probably one of the most bizarre ever seen in a game. So maybe this weird token was where this is from, because they get a bunch of special tokens. There's a token for every faction in the game except for the turtles, and also there's a token for 1 through 8. And what they do is the token 1 through 8 means turn is a turn counter. So they pick one of those for the turn, and they pick one of the faction tokens, and they secretly put them both face down in front of their card. What they're saying when they do this is they're saying that in the turn they chose, and the faction they chose is going to win the game. So basically they can say the Hakan are going to win in turn 5, or the Soul is going to win in turn 8. If that faction wins in the turn they predicted, the Turtles win instead. It's just that simple.
Yeah, that actually makes sense. So that token for the Letnev was just misfiled then? It should have been in
there you go.
It's the Turtles token for predicting who's going to win.
There you go.
So that's pretty neat. It's kind of random, I guess, but if you got a gut feeling, you have to do it before setup.
I don't think it's as random with an experienced group of players.
Well, I want to reread it again. I want to know if you get to predict it after you figured out who's playing which faction. Because if that's the case, then you're right. With experienced players, you're like, oh, Dan's really, really good playing solo, and at the end, I'm going to pick that. But if it's before factions are chosen, then it's pretty much random. I don't
think
know.
it's afterwards.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. But that's pretty interesting. Now, also, what's interesting about these guys is they actually have a little list of cards, and in battle, they can name one of those cards, and it can't be used in the battle. So they can say, no laser rifles. And then they know the only way you can kill your leader is by using the chemical attack.
Can they do that for defense cards, too?
There are certain cards. I can't remember what they're listed, but it lists the specific strategy cards.
Man, if they could do that for defense cards, that'd be amazing.
I know. I'd
like,
check
I have
that
an
out.
energy rifle.
They can block
you
it
can't
out.
play defense.
Now, the weirdest spot about these guys is, they can also deploy for free to the council, the safe
Galactic Council,
the Galactic Council, which is kind of neat. But the weirdest thing about these guys is their tokens are the only tokens that are different sides on both sides for the units. And before the battle phase starts, they can choose to flip over their tokens in any zones they want to the opposite side. If they're on the face down side, they basically aren't there. No battle occurs with them there, but they don't count for owning the square either. So they can kind of have spaces where they control but don't control them. So if you've got a losing battle, you can sort of go to ground and hide and not lose their units and then pop up. They can actually move them around when they're face down too. They just don't count as being there for controlling the square.
They're inside their shells, as it were.
Yeah, they still die from bombardment. They still die from the soul attacks, but they can't die any other way. So it's kind of neat. They can kind of spread them out. I have to play them a few times to get a feel for how to make that work. But
do they get to flip up as part of the deploy phase?
No, it only happens during the battle phase.
Oh.
They flip at the start of the battle phase. They can change their flip, and that's
hilarious.
It's pretty cool.
There's they pop up. They're like, oh, we were here the whole time.
Well, they are the Bene Gesserit, so who knows what happens.
They have Gom Jabars as well.
Yeah. So that's pretty much the whole thing. That's all the factions. We talked about the betrayal cards already, how they work. Let's go into final thoughts.
Craig.
No. Oh, Craig. Should we do Craig?
Yeah.
No, it should be Dan. It should totally be Dan.
Okay,
right.
Dan, in the style of, should we go with Dune? I think
I would say a galactic bureaucrat.
How about a galactic bureaucrat? Please describe the patent pending D6G rating system.
Welcome to the Galactic Council. I will be your tour guide today. As you are aware, there are many protocols here in Mechatol, and one of those is that no one may tour the Galactic Council without being escorted by a high-level Lazax bureaucrat like myself. I have been serving the Lazax Empire for generations. Many of you have puny races that I have outlived by many millennia. If we wanted to, in this room here, the D6 Generation Recording Studio, if we wanted to record the rating of the average chance that a Hakan Lord would enjoy a game, we will choose a random bombardment card, let's say, and we will draw that, and the soul does not get to peek at it. And if you thought that most people would like the game, you would choose a lower number, and you would have to get that number or higher to get it. So if you rolled a 2+, then it would be a good probability that most civilized races would appreciate this game. If, however, you had the taste in games that the have, then you would perhaps rate it as a 6+, and it would be a terrible game, as you would only have a 1 in 6 chance of actually doing it. Of course, if you're the extra, then you could say, oh, you can't play the 6 card, and therefore you have a 5+. However, if you wanted to indicate in some non-mathematically accurate way that you were in between one of those ratings, then you could say with a reroll, and that would be kind of like in between. We, however, the Lazaks, do not use such imprecise language, nor do we, as the Jolnar do, vary our ratings by giving it 1 or 2 different ratings, or, as the Letnev do, add modifiers. Oh, if you are a Hakan, you will add this. If you are a soul, you will subtract this. That is right out from a Lazak's perspective.
Nice. Wow, achievement for that, Dan. That was most impressive.
There you go.
Wow. I don't know how you can follow that up. So, okay, Craig, you want to start with first thoughts? Final thoughts?
Okay, sure. Oh, okay. Yeah, so my thoughts are, I liked it. I had fun. I think it's going to be just like, a backstab your neighbor kind of game, like any of the Kurt Covert games or anything like that. It's going to be very dependent upon the group that you play, I think, because of the alliance element, if you're going to have more than 3 people. I think the sole victory condition is still iffy in my head for 3 to 4 players. I'm not sure how you fight against that or how you defend against that as one of the other players, other than, like Dan said, try to win before turn 8. I think it's a victim of its own theme in my head. The fleet is quite clearly a sandstorm. The Sol attack is quite clearly the worms. The laser cannon firing against the gamma shield, which causes feedback and destroys everything in that part of the city, is right out of Dune.
Right.
And so I'm a huge fan of Dune. I'm not in any way, shape, or form a fan of the TI universe. It seems pretty neat, but I've never encountered. I've watched some games played. I've never cared to sit down for that long to play a game, and it just seems to me like everything fits the Dune theme so well, which is also interesting because, of course, it was Cosmic Encounters first, was it not?
Yes.
Yeah, but it's not. Yeah, but the mechanics aren't like Cosmic Encounters.
I wonder, like, how similar, like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, it seems to be perfect Dune.
Well, when they built that, they built it off of the Cosmic Encounter mechanics, added a bunch of new stuff,
gotcha.
but they built it for Dune.
To be Dune, right? Okay. So it wasn't like the exact same game, but the factions were named different. Or
No.
Literally, they built this to be Dune using the basic engine of Cosmic Encounter. So to me, I'm a huge fan of one. I'm not a fan of the other. I totally I don't feel like, oh, Fantasy Flight, you have failed me, because obviously they tried really, really hard and they just couldn't put that deal together. I think it's a shame, because I think I really would buy this game if it was Dune. And I have a lot of friends who love Dune who would sit down at a game because it's Dune, that won't sit down at a game if it's not something right out of the box that they're going to enjoy. So there's that. I think, I mentioned a couple of the graphic design fails, the turn counter, the influence placement. I played on the upside down side of the board, so it was very difficult for me with the fonts that they used and the color choices that they used, which are artistically beautiful, visually excellent. But it made it difficult for me to kind of see where the different places were and the names of the places, because when you're doing the influence and placing the influence, you got to look for the actual place names at some points. And so I think that could have maybe been cleaned up a little bit, but I think it's a great game. I think it's a very solid game. Because it doesn't have that Dune skin, I guess, it just reminds me of what it could be, and for me that's a detriment. So I would give this a 4+.
4+ straight up.
I am going to follow my Lazaks.
I was going to say, very Lazaks of you.
Yeah.
So, Dan, what do you think?
So I agree that it's a great kind of diplomatic and tactical maneuvering game. It reminds me very much of Diplomacy in that regard, in that there's no, you're not rolling dice to see where you move. The randomness is very much limited in what strategy cards you have access to, that sort of thing. So there's enough to make it interesting, but it is entirely about the diplomacy, convincing people not to attack you in certain spots, and the tactical elements of, hey, I'm going to maneuver myself down here so I can control this area, so I can get the skyport, so I can move over here. There's a lot of that. And even when you dig into the battles, there's a lot of tactical kind of meat there. So it's a good, solid game. I think because of that depth, it requires that you play it at least once to really understand it. I've played it twice now with fewer player counts, and I think playing with 4 is okay. I wouldn't really want to play with 3 again. It's just not really built for that. And I think 5 or 6 is going to be ideal. And I think you want to play with at least 1 or 2 people that know the game cold, which shouldn't be too hard because I think it's a good enough game that people are going to be playing it regularly. But this is one I could see pulling out like once a year and enjoying and saying, hey, that was a good game. It's not going to be like, oh, I can't remember how to play that game. It's so deep. It's so heavy that I have to relearn it. It's just you need to understand the basic mechanics to play it. So I love the flavor and the variety of the factions, but I think I'm going to expand on Craig's skin analogy there. So I think that what this game has is it has a fine epidermis of TI, but it has a very clear dermis of Dune. And those two things are so... Like, they're clearly looking at it and going, well, it's a space thing, you know, Dune was in space, and there's all these, like, yeah, but I can see right under the surface there. Yeah, I can see that it's Dune.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're just like, oh, why wasn't this Dune, you know? And so it's almost like to the point where I could see somebody doing a deluxe, like, fan-made, hey, I've taken this game, and I have reskinned it as Dune. Just with, you know, art, you have to redo all the artwork and everything. It's just like, I don't want to do all that work. So I'll play it. I'll appreciate it for what it is. And I think the TI universe, I haven't played TI. You know, I haven't gotten into those games. I'm surprised they actually don't have more games in the, looking at all their other things where they have like a million different games.
Where they built out the Runebound universe.
Yeah, it's like, why don't you have, you know, you have your Terranoth universe. Why don't you have more? So this may be the first step towards that. Like maybe next up is a TI card game. You know, that's 20 minutes or something. But I think for this, it's a good game on its own, regardless of the theme. I think the theme blends well with what they've done, and I think it's just, we're always going to be looking at that under the surface thing going, oh, but if it was this. It's like if this game was not Dune in the past, and you came to somebody and you said, hey, what do you think of this game? You'd be like, that game's awesome. Right. But it's like, oh, but it could have been more awesome. As soon as you tell somebody it could have been Dune, then they're just like, oh. It'd be like, hey, what if this was Star Wars? You'd be like, oh, well, it's not Star Wars. Oh, it's just these guys with laser swords. Then you're just like, oh, come on, you know. Right. So I'm going to give it a 4+. I think that the average gamer will like it on that. I think that it is very dependent on the group. So you want to play it with a good group. I think if you really like those diplomatic and kind of tactical maneuvering games, then you will really enjoy it. But I think the average gamer is going to have about a 4+ chance of really enjoying the game.
Now here's a possible pitfall to go back on what you just said about it's dependent upon the group. In a 5-player game, can you have a 3-person alliance?
Yes.
So that would totally, like, if you go to a convention and you sign up to play this, and it's you and a buddy, and you go in and there's 3 other friends who you've never met, they could ally with you, and that game's going to suck for you for the rest of the night.
Yeah,
that's
but
like 3-2.
Most of the friends I know, if I went with 3 of my friends, the odds of us 3 allying against 2 people are not going to happen.
And I know that. I am so Russ. My friends are superior.
No. I'm going to saying is not that they're superior. My friends are trying to screw me.
Pitfall. We have friends, Russ, that do not get along when they're playing board games.
That's what I'm saying.
And you could easily see some of these. No. I mean, like, I can think of a couple games at Chez Fleuret that got a little heated, like Battlestar Galactica games, and how dare you throw me into a brig? I'm going to make sure you like die on your way home. I mean, you know, really ridiculous stuff. But like, if you get a game, if you've got a game group that kind of splinters in that kind of vindictive sort of way, that it could go badly.
Well, but the alliances can rise and fall throughout the course of the game. So, is that really any different than in any other game where if we're playing Risk, 3 people would join up and? You know what I mean?
think it's exacerbated in this one because it's so heavily dependent on the diplomatic elements. In Risk, it's just like, hey, I'm not going to attack you. There's not like mechanics that tie you to that.
I think you fix that. Well, that's why I think what's nice about this is the betrayal cards, because they can jump in and say, okay, if you play the game enough where someone always allies, let's throw those in there and really mix it up. And now do you trust them?
I don't think it's a weakness of the game. I just think it's something to be aware of that could happen if you have a game. If you always play the same games with 5 guys and you like your guys, you know they're great, but you know, there's 3 guys that get along a little bit more than the 2 guys, and sometimes they get like, you know, sketchy. And I mean, I'm just saying that the game does allow for a 3-on-2 team up.
It's the problem that all the games like diplomacy have, which is that it's got to be the right group of people. I'll agree with you there.
That's all I'm saying. I don't think it's a weakness of the game at all.
I think just to sum up real quick for me too, I'm with you guys. I'm frustrated because this could have been the best version of Dune ever. And it's not Dune. And that's the biggest problem. And it's because when you look at Dune, I was watching some videos of it to remind myself of all what it looked like, because I used to play it, like I said, when I was a kid. And someone did a great. All the people that talk about how it's one of the first games where people used to say this is the perfect marriage of theme to mechanics.
Yeah.
And I think Rex really shows how true that statement is, because even though it's totally reskinned and totally rethemed, the game as it's played, if you know anything about Doom, it just screams at you, this is Dune. You know, it just really proves how strong those are, which is pretty interesting.
And they clearly developed it with that in mind. I mean, look at the freaking box cover. Like, it looks like Dune.
Well, they're trying to make it. They're in a tough spot because they're trying to make an homage to it without actually stepping on copyright, obviously. One of my favorite parts about the game, and this is, I like to see Vizzini moments in games. And this game definitely has it. I love the combat system because it's basically, you look at your opponent and say, what I have to divine about you is, are you the kind of person who commits your maximum troops to battle, or would you rather commit the minimum troops to battle so you don't lose that many guys? And I love that little element to this game.
Are you the kind of person who would play an energy rifle or an X-35 biological weapon?
And that's why I might make the game longer, because I'll start talking to you and they'll be like, are you finished? I haven't yet begun. And I just go, where was I? Would you put your level 7 leader in there thinking that I would have a trainer card? Anyway, I'll go on forever. And I do love the advanced, the trader mechanic. In the original Dune, there are some improvements in here over Dune. So in the original Dune,
it's not 14 hours.
That's true. You threw in all the trader tokens in the middle. Everybody looked at one token and then wrote down on a piece of paper which trader they had. But in this game, you get to see 4 trader cards, which tells you a couple things. First, you get to pick the one you really want, which gives you a better chance of getting a good trader. But second of all, you kind of get some visibility, maybe if you're lucky, into some of your own guys and kind of know who's kind of safe, which is a pretty neat, adds a little more depth to it, makes it a little less luck-based. I think the game's very easy to teach and easy to explain in terms of mechanics, which is nice for a game this deep. The fluff at the end of the book was a fun read, but I wish it tied directly more into the mechanics of the game. I was reading through there trying to find those little nuggets of fluff justification around the soul attacks and what made it, how I could stop thinking about it as being a sandworm kind of thing. And it's there, but it was almost like they tried to make more of a story out of it. I would have appreciated more just sort of like, almost like just blocks of little mini stories that kind of explain this is the fluffer on this segment of the game, this is the fluffer on that segment of the game.
Yeah, because the whole story is from the perspective of these 4 Lazak's, like, elder statesmen.
You don't learn about the other factions at all. Now, maybe that's because there's a Twilight universe, and you're supposed to, Twilight Imperium universe, and you're supposed to kind of know about it from TI and stuff. But
they give these hints. Like, it's like they gave their game book to somebody, and then they were like, here, write some fluff for, like, from this perspective. And because they have these hints at, like, oh, they saw a Hakan, assault cruiser over here or something.
Right.
But it doesn't get into that at all. And, like, the Letnev, they never even mention. Like, there's
I needed a little more. I almost would have had to have, like, little short stories about each faction or something that might have been better. But because they committed, like, 5 pages to that story.
Yeah, it was a good story.
And it was a good little read, but I wish it gave me more meat about the core of the game. Anyway, I would get this. I think you guys are right on. I think it's a 4+ for most folks. I would make it a 3+ though for players who will not realize that.
I'm displeased.
Back down. Rating. You're a dying race, I tell you. I would say there's a 3+ for folks who are fans of the original Dune and know it well, and like the mechanics of it, because it's that. Or if you like any kind of backstabbing game, because this really is. Dune is I think it's a nice meatier version of diplomacy. Really, there's some parts about diplomacy I think are kind of weak sauce. This is a stronger version of that. I'd rather play this any day than diplomacy. And I wish it was Dune, but even if it's not Dune, I think if you like those kind of games, you'll really, really enjoy this.
Well, in comparing it to Dune, you have, from what I understand, and you can testify to this, that they did a much better job of streamlining the play experience so that it's actually manageable to play, as opposed to being this mammoth, 4 to 6 hour game.
Well, yeah, first of all, there's a turn limit, which didn't used to exist in Dune, so that's the first problem. So that is Dune. That is Rex.
We wish.
The Final Days of the Empire, right? Is that to get the title?
Final Days of an Empire. You had something else to say there, Craig? Or?
Well, I was just going to say, in my head, it's almost more of a negative if they were a fan of Dune.
Well, except you can't get the game, so it's kind of like
story, not so much. Yeah,
I mean the game. I mean the game.
Going to be a positive. But if you're a fan, you can't even see half the mechanics of this game without, like Dan said, actually seeing the bones of Dune underneath it. And that
I said the dermis.
I know, but I think it's bigger than that. I think the structure of this game is Dune.
It's the skeletal structure.
I thought your epidermis was the largest organ in your body.
That's true.
Yeah.
How can it be bigger than that?
Without the bones, it doesn't have a lot of shape, does it?
So, but I think
better
that
stop now.
that's a good point with the. I'd be very interested to kind of do a test of this and take somebody who's never heard of Dune. I don't know how you'd find that person, but and say, hey, let's play this game and like see what they thought. If they really got into it, they're like, oh, this is really cool. And then to say, oh, by the way, this is like this story behind this, to reveal that it's Dune to them afterwards and see how they think it compares.
I think that's a good point, and I don't think it would be that hard because if you think about it, I don't think these are things that are going to jump out at you if nobody puts Dune into the conversation before you play.
That's true.
And they don't know this is based on a Dune game. You could know the story of Dune and not necessarily make these correlations. I don't think they're that strong now that you mention it.
I think you'd have a big aha moment at the end when somebody brought it up.
Exactly.
You'd be like,
oh my God, you're right. It makes sense.
Right.
Perfect sense.
Everything's coming together.
Well, thank you, Dan, so much for joining us this episode.
Yes,
we really
Dan,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Thanks for having me.
We have a very busy schedule. Where can folks find you if they're looking for you on the intertubes?
They can email me at dan@myriadgames.com or they can email me at salute@gamesalute.com.
Well, thanks again, Dan.
Thank you, guys. Have fun playing, everybody.
This Did You Ever Notice is brought to you by Zpocalypse, a survival board game set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Your squad against the undead. It's 2012. Get ready for Zpocalypse. Did you ever notice how frustrating some points in your life can get? Right now I'm in the middle of one of those. And I gotta tell you, this is kind of a cop-out for a Did You Ever Notice, because it's all about the fact that I'm frustrated, and I'm frustrated in part because of Did You Ever Notice. It's just been a very, very, very busy, about a month. And everything's been going very well, but it's been going very well in sort of a stop-start kind of confusing, sort of frustrating sort of way. And a great deal of that is my trip to Australia. And I'm leaving tomorrow morning. So that's another thing I'm kind of frustrated about. Played a game against Jeremy's Ogrins this week. Frustrating to play against Ogrins. It's pretty much frustrating to play against anybody when you're losing, which is pretty much what happens when I face Jeremy and things like go wrong for one part, and then all of a sudden it's just like a cascading thing, and I just can't do anything. But what's frustrating about the Australia-New Zealand trip? So many of you listeners from Australia and New Zealand have reached out to me and asked if there's any way. I mean, nobody's like obnoxious about it or, asking me to change the vacation. The problem is that because it's a group itinerary, I can't do, I have very little freedom at all. And so I've been trying all week to try to figure out. Nothing worked in New Zealand because we are just completely booked in New Zealand, and I have absolutely no free time at all except for like a half hour here or a half hour there, and I'm not going to know when that half hour lands. So I was trying to figure out Sydney because we'll be in Sydney for 3 days. And I got it down to 2 days, and I was trying desperately to figure out when I could get like some free time. But A, Sydney's a very big city, and B, again, I don't know when that free time is going to fall, and it's just been so frustrating. So that's been frustrating, and that's been off the top of my head. Now I'm I'm anticipating leaving home, and I'm leaving Reese really for the first really extended period of time, if you don't count Gen Con, I guess, which is only like 4 days. So and so that's starting to like wear on me also. So I think that all of these things are starting to wear down on me. And so when I'm playing games, I was getting very frustrated this week. So it's all about frustration and how you deal with it. And I think a lot of people deal with frustration in a lot of different ways. And I think one of the worst ways you can deal with frustration is just being like really cranky. And that's kind of what, how I was acting, I think. And that was not very pleasant for anybody. I don't think. So it's all about like what am I going to be doing about Did You Ever Notice on the top half, because I usually have 4 more days. You can tell that this is ridiculously put together. and I'm like trying to rush this because I still have to pack. And of course, because I'm me, I wanted to get 3 colors of paint on 2 more models so that when I come back, I can jump into the last phase and not miss any time, because I'm going to miss all of the cushion time for the Warhammer Fantasy League, which I have been desperate to finish, not only the league, but all the painting. And of course, the most interesting thing that happened to me tonight, which I hadn't even anticipated, was spending time with Reese. Karen is working tonight, and so I was getting ready for him to wake up from his nap. So I was, getting ready for the trip, getting my clothes together and everything, and then he woke up, so we played around for a while, and then we went out and did some last-minute shopping for the trip, and then we had dinner. And then it was time for me to put him to bed, and part of me was like, okay, we got to get him to bed. We got so much to do. And the other part of me was like, oh my God, I'm putting him to bed, and I'm not going to see him again for basically 12 days. And that really bothered me, because I hadn't thought about it until that moment. And now he's in bed. He's upstairs asleep. And I mean, unless he wakes up screaming, in which case it won't be very pleasant. I'm not going to see him. And so my frustration really kind of got in the way of my realizing that. And that got me to start thinking about all the other things that I've been frustrated about and how that's affected me. And I think what I'm trying to say is that it's ideal when you feel this frustration, and I'm not good at this at all, and I think my life would be happier if I could, but I think one way to deal with that is when you feel it coming on, you've got to take a moment, and you've got to take a deep breath, and you've got to look at what's going on and kind of rationally sort of parse it out as to where to best put your efforts. Because I know that I've been putting my efforts in a couple weird places right now that really, over formatting my writing, for instance. I've got it all done and it's all ready to go, but then I do things to it to make it look pretty that aren't necessary, because it's all going to get undone. And that's like this ADD thing that, that's neither here nor there. But so I owe apologies to, I definitely owe an apology to Jeremy. Although if he hadn't rolled that 10 to charge me, another frustrating thing is, Warhammer 40,000 and Warhammer Fantasy. What happened to all the forests in the entire universe? Seriously. It seems like in a year, all of a sudden, we went from some really nice forests here and there around the old world and in Lustria and throughout the galaxy. And then all of a sudden, boom, there are no forests. Oh, you can shoot right through there. Oh, you can charge right through there. Wow, that's frustrating. But anyway, not neither here nor there either. And so so I'm trying to take a deep breath. You can tell that it's not really working, because I've just packed in so much stuff that I have to get done right now that it's just insane. But I've got to take a deep breath, and I've got to sort of smell the flowers, and you've got to notice the lilies in the field, if you will. And I was lucky this week, because as I was playing, I love Dune, as you know now, and as I was playing Rex with Dave, who I haven't really gotten a chance to play a game with in a while, other than the role playing we've been doing, and Luke, who I've never played with before, but I've hung out with him and I wanted to play a game with him, and Dan, who I haven't had a chance to play a game with before, in a long time, and so it was really enjoyable, kind of like a breather, because I didn't know anything about the game. And which actually should be worth a little something in the review, now that I think of it, now that it's all past, because I was so frustrated and pulling I don't have any hair, but I've been, racking my brain. And the rules of Rex were not so complicated that I went even crazier. That actually was a nice breather, which is another thing to think about. And so, and finally, take a deep breath. Look around, calm down, try to be rational about what needs to be done, and prioritize in a way that makes sense. Those are my notes to myself. And then finally, how much do I love reading not comics, with the artwork, but comic, literature. And I just finished, as I said last episode, with the latest Terry Pratchett audiobook, which I just loved. I can't speak highly enough about Terry Pratchett or his work or the audiobooks. And now the urban fantasy stuff that I'm reading right now, of course, all has lots of laughs in it. And And so I realized last time how important all of this humor was to me, and I meant to talk about it, and I ran out of time, and now I'm actually running over. So, did you ever notice how frustrating sometimes things can be? Well, you need to take a deep breath and just let everything wind down. Those are my lessons to you. And that's just about all I've got time for now. So thanks for listening, and good night.
Achievement unlocked! You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by either emailing us at info@the d6generation.com or by posting in our official D6G episode thread at the top of the DACA discussions forum on DACA.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, and happy gaming.
The theme from Total Fangirl comes from the soundtrack of The Last Night on Earth, the zombie game, courtesy of Flying Frog Productions, and is a composition of Mary Beth Magalanes.
The rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain.
Very nice. Very nice. Oh, you look good.
It stays in the plane?
Yes.
It's not on the plane?
No, it's in the plane. Have you not?
Wow.
Are you not a
The
Pygmalion aficionado,
rain.
sir?
No, certainly not. Not after I studied the hell out of it in graduate school.
He's lost it now. He's given up on it.
Yeah, I have.
I'm actually just a My Fair Lady fan.
I thought you were going for the whole second round there. Where's that annoying rain? The plane. All right.
Wow, Russ busts out.
Well,
never to be outdone.
That's a duet, so you have to do it.
Yeah,
separately.
I was doing the duet both parts myself because that's how I roll.
Was it in the plane?
I forgot to
remember that. And where's that blasted plane?
In Spain.
Oh my God!
Was that guy's name Rex Harrison?
Yeah, I believe so.
He's awesome.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
I love listening to that soundtrack because he just speaks singing the entire thing.
See, if I was born then, I could have been that leading lady. That would have been me. All right.